All right, we'll go ahead and call this Tuesday, April 27, 2010 meeting of the Placer County Board of Supervisors to order. Our flag salute this morning is going to be led by Supervisor Montgomery. I'd ask that after the flag salute we stand for a moment of silence in memory of Callie Scogan. She's the daughter of one of our sheriff's deputies who accidentally lost her life last week. And so just a moment of silence in her honor after our flag salute, if you would, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. At this time, clerk will read our statement of meeting procedures.
Welcome to the Placer County Board of Supervisors meeting of April 27th, 2010. Agendas are available on the wall outside this meeting room. If you are here to speak on an issue not appearing on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment period. There is a 3-minute time limit per speaker. The board is not permitted to take action on items addressed under public comment. When you speak, clearly state your name and address for the record. All items on the agenda will be open for the public to address before final action is taken. There is a 3-minute time limit per speaker, which will be monitored by a timer on the podium. If there is a person speaking on behalf of a group with no other testimony from another member of the group, please identify yourself as such, and your time may be extended at the pleasure of the board. Keep in mind that the chairman has the discretion of limiting the total discussion time on any item. If you are hearing impaired, we have listening devices available. It is requested that all pagers and cell phones either be turned off or put in silent mode. Thank you for your participation and cooperation.
Thank you. And this is the time for public comment. This is the appropriate time for any member of the public to address the board on any item that is not on our agenda for today. Understanding the board cannot take action on any item raised in public comment. Is there anybody that wishes to address the board? Yes, ma'am, please step forward. And your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Wanda Adams. My address is 10130 Indian Hill Road, Newcastle.
Please go ahead.
As I said, my name is Wanda Adams. I'm the president of the Retired Public Employees Association, the Auburn chapter, and we are here to say that our position is the same as it was in 2006. We believe that we were granted free medical benefits for life when we retired, and that cannot and should not be changed. In a recent court case in Fresno County, the Fresno County Superior Court ruled in favor of retirees. The school district had granted them the same thing that we have had here, free medical benefits upon retirement. But in 2006, they imposed premiums and fees. So they have been in court for the last 5 years. And the judge recently ruled, in March, I believe, ruled in favor of the retirees, saying that the district had promised district-paid lifetime retiree health benefits, and the retirees won in that case. So we think the precedent has been set, and we hope that you will agree with our position. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Appreciate your time. Melinda. The next. Good morning.
Hello. My name is Sharon Brochus, and I live in Applegate, California. For all of you that were on the Board of Supervisors in 2006,
I want to personally thank you for allowing us to receive our health benefits as we were promised when we retired for lifetime health benefits. We stand before you once again and ask, or should I say beg, for continued health benefits at no cost to us. We all worked for lower wages for many years to experience our pension benefits. I worked for 15 years and received $802 a month with CalPERS. It's not a lot of money, but with Social Security, I do survive. There is no money left over for trips or toys. If my health were better, I would be working part-time wherever I could to buy the extras. We really can't afford to assume any of our health care costs at this time because our health diminishes as we get older, and as I can attest to. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Burgess. Anyone else wish to address the board this morning under public comment?
Good morning. I'm your Placer County Museums Administrator, Melanie Barton, and I'm here today to mention two things to you. The first is to invite you to the opening of our newest exhibit, which is this Friday night from 4:30 to 6:30. It features the Native Sons of the Golden West, and they're celebrating their 125th year, and in California it's also the year for their 135th year. And I learned a lot about this group in the last month and a half putting the exhibit together, and I think all of us will really, I think all of you will enjoy it, and I hope you come and join us. Plus there's going to be good grubs because they're doing the cooking. The other thing is that Museum Month in the state of California is in May, and in the past I've asked the board to do a resolution, but I'd really just like for you to encourage all your friends, family, and anyone else, your staff, to come to a museum during May. So look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to address the board at this time? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to Supervisors Committee reports. Any members of the board have any committee reports to report out at this time? Jennifer.
Yes, I wanted to start with, I sit on the subcommittee for the parks, Forest Hill Park, and we will be having a Forest Hill Park ball field relighting ceremony this coming Monday at 6:30 p.m. at the park in Forest Hill. It looks like it's going to be beautiful weather. We're going to have hot dogs, peanuts, Cracker Jacks, soda pop. Going to sing the national... If you bring them, we'll have Abba Zabbas. We have someone who's going to sing the national anthem, and we're actually going to have a softball game at 8:30. So I believe it's going to be a co-ed game. Should be lots of fun, and I would encourage the community to come and hope to see. You can pitch. Now that your shoulder's better. Good. That's good to hear, Rocky. So just want to encourage everyone to come to that. It's been a wonderful joint effort between the community of Forest Hill and Placer County's Parks Department, which has just done a phenomenal job in getting the lights back up. And then, unrelated to any committees, I wanted to just say that I'd been and saw Robert there and saw Rocky just as he was popping out to the opening for Joanne Neff's cookbook. About 350 people showed up. It's called the Placer County Real Food Cookbook, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for folks in Placer County to figure out how to shop at our local farmers markets, support our local farmers, support local agriculture, and have some absolutely wonderful meals in the process. So just wanted to give my congratulations to Joanne today. I've tried a couple of the menu items already, and I just think it's a great way to keep people farming in Placer County. And that's it.
Fantastic, thank you. Any other board members have any reports at this time? Okay. Wanted to inform the board about my recent trip back to both Washington and Philadelphia. concurrent with our release of our draft of our Placer County Conservation Plan and the 3 years of specific planning work that's gone into it. Robert, of course, having been involved for 4 or 5 years prior to that, I traveled back to Washington, met with representatives of the Environmental Protection Agency, Fish and Wildlife Service, Army Corps of Engineers, all of whom, as Robert knows, have a stake in the outcome of our conservation plan. And for those that don't know, the conservation plan is the kind of the 50-year guideline that we're looking at that is consistent with our, not only our general plan, but also Lincoln's proposed new general plan, as well as the blueprint principles that our 6-county region has signed off on. And the conservation plan provides a coordinated effort at resource planning, resource conservation to mitigate for the impacts of development that we anticipate will be taking place in those areas designated for urbanized development for the next generation or two. And our progress on the plan was very well received, very enthusiastic that we were actually folding in the Corps' 404 permit process into this. We are the first habitat conservation plan that anybody's aware of that is actually taking that kind of bold, aggressive step, and that was very well received by the agencies while we were back there. Then traveled up to Philadelphia, as folks might know, and our board certainly recalls, in December of 2008, this board adopted the Regional University Plan, with a university to be named later. Of course, Drexel University has been a partner in moving the process forward. Went up to Philadelphia to meet with, at the request of, the chairman of the Board of Trustees of Drexel University, as well as the interim president of Drexel, Chuck Pannoni, to go and kind of give them, coincident again with the PCCP, kind of give them the broader overview of how Placer County envisions all of these various pieces coming together, our general plan, Lincoln's general plan, our transportation infrastructure network, as well as the PCCP, so they understand that their project isn't just a little island sitting out there all by itself, but they're actually, over the next 30 to 50 years, we will achieve build out of the West Placer area, and it will be part of a network that provides adequate infrastructure to meet the needs of a university and all of that. Had a chance while I was back there to meet the new president of Drexel, John Fry. Younger gentleman, great vision, former administrator with Penn, University of Pennsylvania, which of course is right there adjacent to Drexel. So certainly understands his area and their issues right there in Philadelphia, but is looking forward to learning our area, and he promised me that August or September of this year he will be making a trip out here to meet us, to sit down with us and make sure that all of our visions for that area and the 4-year university opportunity are consistent, and that we're all moving forward in a good, positive direction. So also had a chance to meet with the provost, the assistant provost, and a number of other facilities-related folks back there at Drexel. So just want to report back, let you know that it was very productive and very busy. Yes, Mr.
Has there been any change in the staff of Drexel since the passing of?
No. The staff has remained largely the same folks with whom we've been dealing. Which is helpful. Having that bit of continuity is helpful. The provost changed a year and a half or so ago, but since Taki's passing, no, there has not been any change.
That's encouraging.
Yes, and it through this process, Drexel had been identified fairly early on by the project applicants as the university partner. Their effort being led by their president, Taki Papadakis, who passed away a year and a half ago now. So an interim president was appointed, and now a new president. So unfortunately, having to educate at the president level 3 different administrations, if you will, has proven to be a little bit more time-consuming than we would have thought. But fortunately, all of them seem still very enthusiastic about the opportunity that's presented to them by virtue of the Sikopoulos family making the land donation. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. All right, we will move on to the consent agenda. Now, our consent agenda contains two items, 29A and 29B, that require us meeting as the redevelopment agency board. I'm going to ask council, would you like those two items taken as a separate motion so that we might, I'm sorry, not 29, it's 28A, 28A and B. Would you like those two items removed and us to convene separately, or under consent, can we simply acknowledge our role as the redevelopment agency in adopting those as well?
I think it's appropriate to keep them under consent.
Okay.
The agenda indicates that
Okay.
you're acting as the redevelopment
Okay.
agency. And there's
Thank
one item that I believe someone wants to take off the consent agenda.
We'll get to that. Looking for clarification on those two items, and then prior to a motion on consent, is there any items that any board members wish to have removed? Ms. Montgomery?
Yes, I would like to ask that items 22A and 22B be removed from the consent agenda for public discussion.
22A and B. Okay.
And 22C is also part of 22B.
22C is part of 22B?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a separate action in that staff memo.
Okay. Any other, then we will go ahead, any other items any board members wish to have removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, any items any members of the public wish to have removed from the consent agenda so that it might be addressed? Seeing none, I would. Okay. I have a motion, Supervisor Holmes, second Supervisor Rockholm, to approve the consent agenda absent items 22A, B, and C. Roll call, please.
Holmes?
Aye.
Montgomery?
Yes.
Rockholm?
Yes.
Wygant?
Wygant?
Yes.
Euler?
Oh, aye. I'm sorry, I didn't hear him.
Can you hear me now?
We will take those items as staff items and plug them in as department head items as we move through this morning, as opposed to taking them right now, because we have a 9:10 timed item that we're a little bit late for, and then we have a department head item that I had indicated I wanted to take immediately after that 9:10 item, so we'll move those three consent items in immediately upon completion of those items. All right, we will go ahead and move on to our 9:10 timed item. This is a presentation made by Supervisor Holmes in regard to Sexual Assault Awareness Month in Placer County. Supervisor Holmes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michelle, are you there? Do you want to come down to the lectern, please, and as I present this? For anybody that's not aware, Peace for Families is a nonprofit organization in Placer County that provides comprehensive services to victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. Their services extend to Auburn, Lincoln, Rockland, and Roseville. These services include a safe house for battered women and their children, hospital accompaniment for rape survivors, in-person crisis intervention, assistance in obtaining emergency food, clothing, transportation, individual and group counseling, and legal advocacy and accompaniment. So I'm pleased to present this proclamation declaring April 2010 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month in Placer County. And I have to put my glasses on, this print's real tiny. Whereas sexual assault is an intolerable violent crime with public health implications for every person in Placer County as a victim, survivor, or as a family member, significant other, neighbor, or co-worker of a victim survivor, and whereas no one person, organization, or agency, or community can eliminate sexual assault on their own. We must work together to educate our entire population about what can be done to prevent sexual assault, support victim survivors and their significant others, and increase support for agencies providing services to victim survivors, and whereas Peace for Families has led the way in Placer County in addressing sexual assault by providing 24-hour hotline services to victim survivors and their significant others, responding to emergency calls, offering support and comfort to those impacted by sexual assault during medical exams, criminal proceedings, and empowering those impacted by sexual assault to chart their own course for healing. And whereas ending sexual assault in Placer County must include active public and private efforts to end sexual violence in collaboration with Peace for Families, including conversation about what sexual violence is and how to prevent it, how to help survivors connect with crucial counseling and other support services, and how every segment of our society can work together to better address sexual violence. And whereas staff and volunteers of sexual assault programs in Placer County work year-round to encourage every person in Placer County to end sexual violence and to support survivors by providing prevention education, survivor empowerment information to schools, churches, civic organizations, as well as medical, mental health, law enforcement, education, and criminal justice personnel regarding sexual assault issues. And whereas Peace for Families requests public support and assistance as it continues its effort to bring real hope for freeing Placer County from the tragedy of sexual violence to create a future where all women, men, and children can live free from sexual violence and exploitation. Now therefore be it proclaimed that Placer County Board of Supervisors does hereby declare April 2010 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month and encourages all to reflect on the value and importance of doing their part to eliminate sexual assault crimes in Placer County. I'm very pleased to present this to you. Now you can say a few words.
Okay.
Okay.
I want to thank you very much. For those of you who don't know, Peace for Families used to be Placer Women's Center, so I know there is some confusion for some people, and we have been in Placer County for over 30 years, providing support to survivors of sexual violence as well as domestic violence. But we also provide training and education for our young people because it's our goal to get rid of sexual violence. If they have strategies, if they know what to look for, they can keep themselves safe. So we want to thank the Placer County and all of the residents as well as the Board of Supervisors for all the support you provided in the past, and look forward to continuing to work with you as the years go by. Thank you.
Michelle, if there's somebody that would like to get a hold of your organization, how would they do that?
Well, if it's an emergency, our crisis line number is 800-575-5352, and our office number is 530-823-6224. Someone will help you.
And in addition to providing services, you also welcome volunteer support as well as contribution support.
Absolutely, especially now, we definitely do. And in addition to support, in addition to volunteer and money, we also need donations. We have a safe house. We have transitional living facilities for the women moving forward. So gently used or new items that we find in our closets, we can definitely use those as well.
And the phone number, if somebody has some of those, once again, is
530-823-6224, or the website is www.peaceforfamilies.org.
great. Thank you. Supervisor Holmes?
I just wanted to stress how important the education component of your program is. People that are raised in a home that has sexual violence or domestic abuse, it seems to transfer into their next generations. And so it's important for people to understand what sexual assault is and what domestic violence is. Some young people are grown up with it and they think that's normal, and it's not. So anyhow, I just appreciate your support in moving that forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you for being here this morning. Okay, we're going to jump forward to department items, department head item number 8. This is the Community Development Resource Agency planning update. This is to provide the board, as the board will recall, back in our budget workshops 2 years ago now, I believe, staff requested permission to initiate a review of the existing Granite Bay Community Plan, which at that time was about 20 years old. The board concurred and sent staff on that direction. For the last 2 years, we've been meeting with the MAC as well as a couple of community meetings, and I just wanted the board to get an update. Thought it was time for the board to hear back as to what was happening at this point in anticipation of our upcoming budget workshops this summer, where I would look forward to the board providing additional direction at those workshops this summer in regard to the update. So with that, Mr. Johnson?
Thank you,
Did I
Mr.
just cut
Chair.
out half
Actually,
your staff report?
that was an excellent introduction that makes mine quite easy. As Mr. Euler noted, this is a work program that the planning staff has been working on for the past 18 months. The intent of today's presentation is to give you an update as to where we've been and where we're going with this presentation, and to let you know what options may be available, not necessarily at this point in time, but in incorporation with the August budget workshops. We've outlined some options that the board may want to consider between now and that time as we decide how and when to move forward with this work program. So today's presentation will be made by E.J. Evaldi.
Sorry, EJ, I'm sorry, before you get started, there was an amended sheet. Did all the board members receive the amendment or the errata sheet for the staff presentation? Has that been distributed to the board members?
I believe so.
Because I'm not seeing mine up here. You have yours?
Well, I just had
Oh, okay. I don't know why I'm not seeing, maybe it's buried in here. Oh, well, I'm sorry. Go ahead. We'll figure it out. And then simply just, if you would, please, during the public, or during your presentation, point out that part where you're deviating from the staff report as it had been published.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members of the rest of the board. The purpose of this review was to evaluate whether the 20-year-old assumptions and general community plan goals and policies remain valid in the community plan, and determine what changes, if any, are needed to the policy document and or the land use diagram. Over the last 18 months, Granite Bay residents and property owners, community associations, the Granite Bay MAC, and county staff have all participated in the review of the Granite Bay Community Plan. There has been a community meeting, a workshop, and at least 9 presentations before the Granite Bay MAC, all of which the public has had the opportunity to provide input. The first community meeting was held in February of 2009 at the Lutheran Church of the Resurrection in Granite Bay, where there was a turnout of over 400 people. It was announced at that time that there would be a 6-month window where property owners and residents could make suggestions for policy changes and submit requests for land use changes. By the June 30th, 2009 deadline, the Planning Department had received 284 forms with suggestions for policy change and 49 land use change request forms. The Planning Department also held a workshop in October of 2009 with over 300 people in attendance. The purpose of this workshop was to provide the public an opportunity to take part in a community survey exercise where they could provide input and comments on community requested policy and land use changes that were submitted earlier in the year. A total of 244 surveys were completed and turned back into the Planning Department. At the Granite Bay MAC meeting last month, staff provided an overview of community-suggested policy changes and preliminary results of the community survey. To summarize, the survey results showed that the community was generally in support of existing community goals and policies, However, there were suggestions for new policies in various areas of the community plan as they relate to housing, land use, community design, and natural resources, among other things. It is important to note that a significant number of property owners and residents did not want to see any changes to the community plan. As mentioned earlier, there were 49 land use change requests submitted. This affects less than 1% of parcels located within the plan area, but could result in 392 additional residential units if the land use is changed. Most of this density, about 2/3, is confined to a few larger properties or infill properties. This includes a 67-acre site along the south side of Douglas Boulevard across from Sino Avenue. There's the Tanner property, which is a 66-acre parcel on Cabot-Solomon Road. There's also a 10-acre site near the intersection of Eureka Road and Sierra College Boulevard. And you are familiar with the Enclave at Granite Bay project, which was here earlier this year. That's on Elmhurst Drive. The remaining land use change requests are from individual property owners who are interested in a land use change that would basically allow a lot split. This includes 8 properties in the Itchy Acres Road area. In addition, there are a few requests for commercial and professional office land uses along Douglas Boulevard and Auburn Folsom Road. Staff is currently in the process of meeting with these property owners about their request, and this is on the May Granite Bay MAC agenda to provide an overview of comments received from the community survey as they relate to the land use request. So at this point in the review process, we have all but completed the information gathering phase of this review, is what I'll call it. As staff continues its public outreach efforts through the Granite Bay MAC, we continue to gather the background data necessary for a community plan update. It is anticipated that this work will continue at least until the end of this fiscal year. Beyond that time frame, staff is prepared to discuss a range of options or alternatives that would keep this planning process moving forward. Included in your board memo is a description of these 5 different options. It goes into great detail, and I will try to provide a brief description of these. Option number 1, this would include an update of the policy document and the land use diagram. Under this option, the Granite Bay Community Plan would be comprehensively updated, including changes to goals, policies, land use, and zoning. This would require an environmental impact report and fairly significant costs for the EIR, consultant costs for the EIR, and also a sewer study. There is a potential to offset general fund impacts by requiring a fee for land use changes I want to mention. Option number 2 is to update the policy document and identify future study areas for land use changes. And in this option, we would actually assign a density to these properties. Changes to the land use diagram and zoning would be limited to key properties or areas based upon the review and recommendations of the Granite Bay MAC and the Planning Commission. So I want to note that these future study areas have not been defined. That would be defined through that process. With this option, an EIR would likely be necessary to analyze programmatic and cumulative impacts associated with a change in land use. It would cost less than the EIR under option 1 because of the narrower scope of review. Option number 3, this is similar to 2, would be update policy document and identify future study areas with no density assigned. This option is similar to option 2 but differs in one respect. The identification of a future study area does not include the assignment of a land use density. It is possible that this option, which emphasizes an update to the policy document, could be prepared with a negative declaration. Both the plan and the negative declaration could be prepared by county staff with no outside contract assistance. I would want to note, though, that an evaluation of the actual future study area parcels could result in a determination to either provide more specific information on the nature of the land use change or determine a worst-case scenario, both of which could result in the need to prepare an EIR. The costs associated with the preparation of the environmental documents for future study area parcels would be borne by the project applicants. Option 4, they're getting simpler as we go along, would be to update the policy document only. Under this option, no changes to land use would be considered, only the policy document would be updated. This would all be done by county staff. It would include a negative declaration, or that would be the intent, and there would be no additional general fund contribution, staff costs only. And then lastly, option number 5 would be no changes at this time. Under this option, the Granite Bay Community Plan is not updated. At such time that the county-wide general plan was updated, policy changes could be considered for Granite Bay as part of the update for the county-wide general plan effort. So that's our overview. That's an update of where we're at. I'm going to throw it back your way just for a discussion, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
It's important to note, as stated in Mr. Valdi's presentation, this is intended as an information item. No action is required by the board. It's important that you know that staff is very sensitive to the expenditure of monies as it relates to this project, and all of the work that staff is doing is within the current planning department's budget, and no additional monies are being requested at this time. Staff anticipates that the future direction set for the Granite Bay Community Plan update will be a major part of your budget discussions at your August hearing, and that no additional monies are being requested at this time. Staff is available for any questions you may have.
Okay, questions from board members. Supervisor Holmes.
From your presentation, you sent a survey out to residents in the Granite Bay area, and it seems from your presentation that this update is not community-driven, it's driven by staff at the direction of the Board of Supervisors. Would that be a fair statement?
That would be a fair statement, and when we initiated this process, we actually notified all 8,500 property owners within the Granite Bay area, so this has been kind of a all-inclusive, somewhat overwhelming process, but that was the intention.
It would be my personal choice to move this to after our August workshop, so we can find out how much it's going to cost and whether we have the funding to proceed.
Ms. Montgomery.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Evaldi and Mr. Johnson. Mr. Evaldi, I wanted to make sure that I understood on option 3 the potential cost on this. It sounds like from what you were saying is that they range from just staff costs, if we have a negative declaration, to as much as $500,000 if we have to go through the CEQA process?
That is correct, and that's part of the analysis that staff still needs to work on between now and the August budget hearings, so we have a better idea of what the actual cost may be, so that we can present that information to your board.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear, because under fiscal impact it said staff-only costs, and I wanted to make sure that's at the low end.
That's correct. We anticipate that it will be staff-only costs. If it's anything more than that, we will come back to your board, because we don't have the monies in the planning department budget to cover any additional expenditures.
Okay. Two more quick questions. The first, I don't know if you can answer this today, EJ, I'm sorry, is it says property owners submitted a total of 49 land use change requests. Is that 49 separate individuals or 49 separate land use request changes?
Those were 49 land use requests that affected a total of 53 parcels.
Do we have somewhere the number of actual property owners? Maybe I'm not understanding what you've written here, but what I'm trying to get at is how many individuals or corporations submitted these 49 land use change requests?
For each one of those is an individual request, so there are 49.
Okay, so there's no duplication on ownership in there?
No.
Okay, great, thank you. And then just, if indeed this does, or when indeed this does move into August, I would like to see, it would be helpful for me to see the 49 land use change requests specifically. And I would also like to see I don't know what I'm getting myself into here, but the 284 policy change request forms as well, just to get the tone and tenor of what it was that people were asking for. Thank you.
EJ, on that note, might be helpful for you to provide to the board members the PowerPoint presentation that you put together for the MAC that summarized both the land use change requests, how you kind of categorize them by area and nature, as well as the policy change requests. You did a very nice job of summarizing all of those, and I think it'd be helpful for the board members to see that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Other members of the board have any questions at this time? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open it up to the public. Any members of the public wish to address the board on this item?
My name is Harrison Clark, 8261 Berg Street. Been in Granite Bay 25 years, and a lot of us have talked about this day coming. Didn't think it was going to be quite such a freight train, but it is here. Why the update? It started out as a review. That's what the state requires. That makes sense. Look at the plan and see what it needs. It very quickly became obvious it's not a review, it's an update, and it was called an update by everyone after that. What happened to the review? The reasons given to the residents of Granite Bay for it going forward even was that the Granite Bay Community Plan hasn't been updated in 20 years. Well, first, it doesn't have to be updated. According to state guidelines, it only has to be reviewed. In fact, it has been updated 5 times. Some minor, as EJ pointed out, one major because the Citizens Committee met for a year weekly to do it. Hundreds, thousands of hours. That was the circulation element. I mean, we became traffic engineers in that process. So it hasn't been without updates. We were told the state will sue us if we don't update, and it will cost more to fight the suit than it will cost to do the update. Well, truth is we meet state requirements. We've been updated. We only need to be reviewed. The letter from the governor's office was handed out shortly thereafter, and we were told the letter proves that we need to update this community plan. The letter only said that 2 elements of the county general plan needed to be reviewed to be in conformance with state guidelines on reviews. Bottom line is we still don't have a reason for this update. We don't have a review that says that there are elements of the plan that need work. I mean, EJ's collected a lot of information, but in 18 months, we haven't heard why. We think we know why, of course. How is it happening? A committee of residents created this plan, and it has won awards. The committee of residents did the circulation overhaul, but not in this update. It's called Divide and Conquer. Citizens were told that individually they must come forward. They can't come forward as groups. Any group that came forward was called a special interest group and ruled out. Groups that made a request to be on the MAC agenda, to discuss committees that might collect information, go to the homeowners groups and what have you, was refused to be on the agenda. A group also asked to be on the agenda to actually conduct a survey, electronic survey, that might reach thousands of Granite Bay residents. Put ads in the Granite Bay View and other things. Not just one letter a year ago, January. That's all the community has received about this. One letter. Most of them, that's all they knew. They haven't heard anything since. But anyway, the group wanted to do a proper survey. We weren't even allowed on the MAC agenda. There's been just, that's 3 minutes? Okay, I urge you to choose option 5. Let's take a break and do a proper review and decide what we need to do before we talk to developers. I mean, aren't they a special interest group? They're being given first treatment, and the community was refused to observe the meetings with the developers.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Anybody else wish? I just said thank you. Anybody else wish to address the board?
Good morning. My name is Holly Johnson. I live at 8277 Kentshire Way in Granite Bay. I also have my business law office in Granite Bay. I'll make it very simple. I have two things I'd like to request to you. I understand you probably will defer this to your August budget meeting. Number one, I request that you give adequate notice to the property owners and to the community at large so they can have their involvement in this process. And number two, before you go forward with deciding what's this going to cost, et cetera, please listen to what the community has stated and select option 5 to do nothing, to leave the plan as it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Lori Ryan. I live on Itchy Acres. I'm sorry I didn't prepare anything, so on the top of my head, I'm one of those homeowners. We live on 5 acres. Across the street is 20,000 square feet. We would like to see change in Granite Bay. Not significant change, but after 20 years, things have changed. 5-acre parcels no longer make sense. Our water was free then. It's not. I would rather see the recommendation come from the board. Politics aside, I think what we're asking for is the right thing to do, and some change after 20 years is appropriate. Oh, and I don't think, but I can't speak for any homeowner other than myself, that we don't mind paying our part of whatever the process is to move forward. I don't know if I'll resent saying that, but.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please, just step on up. You don't need to.
Hi, Kurt. I'm Dale Munson. I live at 6640 Itchy Acres Road. I've lived there for 24 years. I'm one of 95 neighbors who resists and is against the rezoning on Itchy Acres. There's a lot of reasons for it. There's good technical reasons, like no sewer, no rezone. The road is completely inadequate for more traffic, and we have other technical reasons. Plus, there are 95 of us neighbors who do not want rezoning on Itchy Acres. In Paul's summary, it says 120 signed or unsigned comments about Itchy Acres. I'm one of 95 neighbors who has taken exception to rezoning on Itchy Acres. And I think one of the big items is that depending on your vision, what is your vision of Granite Bay? If you want to go what the public says, protect and preserve the unique rural character of the community, reference Granite Bay Community Plan, then you won't rezone some of these 4.6 acre parcels because nobody's making them anymore. The developers today, the Tosopoulos, those Tanners, they aren't going to give you 4.6 acre parcels. They had 4.6 acre parcels. They're now 2.3, and they want 0.9. So I think we should all be trying to preserve.
Step back a little from the microphone.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We should all be trying to preserve those 4.6 acre parcels in Granite Bay if we really want it to be what the community has said they want it to be in the policy area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just
And I'd like to have this distributed, including the map
Okay.
that shows the 95 property owners. Somebody asked, are they, and they're signed property owners.
And just a point of clarification, the purpose today is not to discuss any individual request or group of requests that have been made. The purpose today is for staff to provide an update to the board as to the process, how it's gone thus far, and what the board will be looking at by way of options in our budget hearings as we move forward. So
Option
that's
4.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dale. Appreciate it. Any other members? Doctor?
Mr. Euler, I have not made a public comment since February 11th,
I'm sorry, we need your name for the record, sir.
My name is Will Ellis. I live at 6550 Arabian Circle. At that time, I announced a new group in Granite Bay, SaveGraniteBay.com, and I threatened you with recall.
Sir.
You promised us that there would be public input into this process. The night that you promised us, the 400 people at that meeting were asked to raise their hand for a vote. Not by you, I understand, but nonetheless asked to raise their hand. The majority went against updating the plan. Then we went through this survey process. EJ counted them up. The score's 89 to 49. Don't update the plan. Then we go through your survey process. EJ's estimate at the MAC was 75% against updating the plan. My question is, now that we've gone through 3 mechanisms, 2 by your choice, 1 by a meeting you arranged, and public action, all of which the majority of Granite Bay don't want this plan updated, are you listening? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is Sandy Harris, and I'm speaking this morning for the Granite Bay Community Association. We've been around longer than EJ's been here, or Michael or any. And we were instrumental in the development of the first community plan. And we thank you for this opportunity to provide input at this meeting. When the board directed staff to revisit the Granite Bay Community Plan, Supervisor Euler informed the community that he supported the following 3 parameters: no new commercial zoning, the 300-foot setback on the south side of Douglas would remain intact, and the population would be capped at 23,000. Considering these parameters and the fact that only 49, which is 0.6% of the 8,500 property owners notified of the update submitted requests for land use changes, a case can be made that the overwhelming majority of the community accepts the plan as adopted in 1989. There has been no push from the community to undertake this update. Only 2 general plan amendments have occurred in over 20 years. So the plan doesn't need to be adjusted to reflect land use changes. In addition, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Euler stated at the beginning of the process that depending on the requests received, there might not be a need for a complete update, and this could be a simple review. According to the staff report, most of the rezoning requests can be handled with a minor land division process. The Granite Bay Community Association has felt since the beginning of the process that some language in the plan should be updated to reflect new state mandates. The GBCA feels that option 4 is the best alternative. It reflects the survey results submitted by residents, community input at MAC, meets state requirements, and is cost effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Anyone else? Just real quick, if I may, by show of hands, how many more folks will want to address this item? Okay, so I just had these last 2 speakers. All right, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First time I've ever done this. My name is Russell Sutliff. I live at 8241 East Hidden Lakes Drive, Granite Bay, California. In 1988, I don't know, I didn't prepare any notes. I just want to talk to you. I have lived in Granite Bay since 1988. I grew up in Long Beach, California. The thing that struck me when I came up here as a practicing orthodontist and opened up Granite Bay Orthodontics is the absolute beauty of this country that we live in. Coming from Long Beach, I grew up there, and there were pastures around going from Long Beach to Knott's Berry Farm. I remember looking out the window and mooing at the cows. There were orange groves, and now it's wall-to-wall city. This is a beautiful place. We live here, we accept it just as it is. Right behind the office, they talked about having high-density housing right by Granitos. This came through as some type of I got a letter as a business owner there, and it just made me think. I live around the corner, going up by the lake. People need to have places to live, but Granite Bay is a gem. I hate to see it change for what it is. I have when I moved up here, going down Douglas was a 2-lane road, dirt berms on both sides. Now you hit Sierra College, it's city. I hate to see that coming back towards us. And I thank you very much for this opportunity to address you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am.
Hi, I'm Brenda Common, and I live on 9866 Beckenham Drive. And I just want to let you know, we've lived in Granite Bay for 6 years. We moved down from Lake of the Pines, and it was with the heavy heart I left Lake of the Pines because it is beautiful. And my husband, we had to come down closer for work, so we came down here, and that's why we chose Granite Bay. So I'm begging and pleading with you that I hear, the situation with Itchy Acres, and it always comes back to money, the cost of water or developers. That it's funny how money is always behind it, the motivation, and once that's done, you can never get those acres, but those acreage and those parcels back. There's plenty of people who love to buy those 5 acres. And also, I wanted to make a notation that I don't know if the board knows that since the Enclave, I know you don't want to mention specifics, since they have requested the rezoning, there has been, the school district has closed down a school, and there's the density that has moved in there in the last 6 months. There have been 2 children that have been hit by a car in the last 4 months. So I want that noted, that you know that if you would check into that area, that can it support the rezoning that's being requested. So if you could protect, the urban sprawl, if, we can never get that back. And nature, no matter how much money's out there, to preserve what we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? All right, seeing none, we'll first of all bring it back to the board for any additional questions or comments of staff by any board members at this time. No additional questions or comments. I want to thank the members of the public that made the trip up here. This is actually it's like a MAC meeting in the middle of our MAC meetings. The same folks that have been involved in the process all along are here, and I appreciate your continued involvement. Just a couple of comments and thoughts. As a 40-year resident that actually precedes Granite Bay. There was no Granite Bay when we moved here in 1970. It was Loomis or it was Roseville, you choose. And the only things named Granite Bay were the entrance to the state park of Folsom Lake at Granite Bay and the Granite Bay Bait and Tackle Shop up where Granito's now is, up by the old Bull Pit restaurant, which I'm sure Sandy remembers. So Granite Bay has evolved over time. In fact, the gentleman, Mr. Sutcliffe, in Hidden Lakes Estates, my dad developed Hidden Lakes Estates. The lakes that you see in Hidden Lakes Estates weren't there. That's all man-made. So yes, Granite Bay has changed over the 40 years, and I think what you'll see, as Sandy pointed out, 8,500 parcels in Granite Bay, yet only 49 requests received. Probably a pretty good indication that we're pretty well built out. And pretty much what you see is what you're going to get. And I think that folks that have been involved in this process as we move through have seen that be the case. They've seen what originally was perhaps a larger number of folks that were concerned about those potential impacts of massive rezones have gone away, because what we've seen out of the property requests is that that's not what they are. And so it's because, quite frankly, it's because of the actual nature of the land use requests and the very small number of them that staff has been able to present to our board 5 different options, a number of which include nothing beyond really staff, a little bit of staff and administrative time. And so I look forward to engaging the conversation further, as we have all along over these 18 months at our MAC meetings, as well as when we come back here to the board, looking for board direction on how staff should proceed, recognizing that that every option does exist, from no changes to anything to reviewing all of the requests that have been submitted. But in light of that, as Sandy indicated, there are a number of things that I will be asking the board to not consider, and that would be additional commercial. I'll be asking the board not to consider those land use change requests. The preservation of the 300-foot setback on the south side of Douglas Boulevard. So a number of the things that have lent themselves to the look and feel of our community are the things that I have always and will always continue to support. And so with that, unless there are no other comments by board members, I will thank staff for their time, thank the public for their time, and we will move on to our next department head item after I give folks a minute to file out who don't want to hear our next items. Right. I said department head. I'll ask folks to please take their conversation out so that we can move on. Just quickly, we do have item number 7, which is approving minutes of our March 16th board meeting, which Supervisor Rockholm was absent, therefore is listed on department head items as opposed to consent. So at this time, we'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our March 16th meeting.
Second.
Motion by Holmes, second by Montgomery to approve the minutes of the March 16, 2010 Board of Supervisors meeting. Roll call, please.
Holmes?
Yes.
Montgomery?
Yes.
Rockholm? Weigand?
Yes.
Euler?
Aye. Thank you very much. All right, we have a 10:40 timed item that we will, I'm sorry, 9:40. Thank you. Getting ahead of myself. A 9:40 timed item that we will go ahead and jump back to at this point. There he is. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chairman and board members. Andrew Gaber with the Public Works Transportation Division. And the item before you this morning is the traffic fee annual inflationary adjustment. As you're well aware, the fee was established in 1996, and part of that enabling ordinance is that there's an annual adjustment which comes to the board each year. The fee program is nexus-based, and so one of the things that we need to be able to show is that with these annual adjustments that we are keeping the program are viable, and that our costs are going up, and so that the fee needs to go up to keep that going. What we utilize is the ENR Engineering News Records 20-City Index, which covers both materials and labors, and the annual increase this year is 1.6%, which is what we're asking for. A couple of things that we've been questioning the last couple of years, that what's happening with construction costs and everything else. First of all, for our county bids on our own projects, while we're not seeing prices increase, we're not seeing them decrease anymore. And so while we're still seeing, they're coming in below our engineers' estimates, they're not coming in as much below as they were, and that we're finding that the materials prices and those things are starting to creep up some, but the contractors, again, because they're so interested in just keeping everybody working, are keeping a lot of those costs internal. Another thing is that last year the index was 5+%, and we only asked for a 2.5% increase. And then the third thing is that the CIPs that we utilize are typically based on a 20-year build-out horizon. And so while we are asking only for 1.6 this year, there have been other years in the past where the changes have been more significant in that we've not been able to recover those costs then. One last thing that I was asked to mention is that this item is independent of the next item, and so the fee increase and the fee ordinance changes are independent. They don't affect each other. If approved, the fee increase would take effect July 1. Therefore, I ask that the board conduct a public hearing and that staff recommends approval of the increase, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions by board members or staff at this point? Okay, seeing none. I'm sorry?
I'll reserve mine.
Okay.
Public.
All right, seeing no questions at this time, this is a public hearing. We'll go ahead and open that up at this point. Any members of the public wish to address the board on this item? Mr. Rogers, good morning.
Morning, Chairman Euler, members of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Dennis Rogers, and I'm with the North State Building Industry Association. And I just have one handout to give, and who should I give that to pass it out to you guys? The handout I have, I'll go into in just a moment. We're here today to oppose this increase. We believe that transportation increases aren't warranted at this time in your fee because your bids are coming in below the engineer's estimates have for some time, and therefore is resetting the overall project cost level to a point where you don't need an inflationary factor. While the engineering news record may have gone up 1.6%, the Caltrans index has actually gone up even less than that, and that is only focused in on projects that are related to transportation. Other jurisdictions, even with a proposed increase in your area, have not increased their fee load in recognition of the fact that we believe that inflationary pressures have actually been kept in check. Why I gave this handout to you is this is the Case-Shiller Index, and it has a bunch of data on there, but the one that I'd really like you to pay attention to is the red line that says home prices. If you look at that, this index goes back to 1880. It shows two anomalies, basically, from a home price perspective. One was the Great Depression. You see a couple of decade-long decrease in prices and then a slow climb back up to a historical average. The second anomaly that you see was the last housing bubble that we just went through. If you look, the spike up in price was quite significant, and we're back down again to the level we used to be. For us, the reason why that is important is that all of our local government partners, so it's not just singling out Placer County, everyone in this region increased their costs during the last time that the housing bubble ran up. We were able to charge prices that could absorb those costs. A typical healthy housing market has 4 or 5 to 1 from a home price to a wage rate ratio. So that means if you make $50,000, you can afford a $200,000 to a $250,000 house. During the housing bubble, because of the funny money Wall Street loans that were out there, that increase went to 9 to 1. So someone making $50,000 went from being able to afford a $200,000 to a $250,000 house to a $450,000 house, a $500,000 house. The problem with that is that they really could only afford a $200,000 to a $250,000 house. So that's why we're in the foreclosure mess that we're in. So the difficulty that we face is that housing prices are resetting, including those in the new construction area. And we cannot afford to increase cost structure that exists today that is unsustainable because it was set during a housing price run-up that we're not going to see again. Because at the end of the day, everyone needs a loan. Well, let me rephrase that. 99% of the people buy their homes with a loan. They don't have the ability to write a check for a $250,000 proposal. And so, closing, since my time was up, I apologize for running past. What we're really interested in doing, and I know that we've spoken with Mr. Miller before on this, is to sit down with you and actually go over the cost structure that you have. And it's not one that we think you should be set at the height of the market, which was back in the 2003, 4, 5 time, nor at the bottom of the market, which it currently is. We think it should be right in the middle of the road, it should be sustainable, and it should be one that allows folks that make the current wage rate in Placer County to be able to afford to buy that house. We've done this successfully in other jurisdictions, and the interesting thing about it is some of the costs went up and some of the costs went down, but we were very comfortable with both of those directions because we knew that it was sustainable over time. You have cost increases. Unfortunately, a lot of the transportation fees, the cost in the future, will probably go up. They're not currently going up, but they might go up in the future because asphalt is petroleum-based. And we understand that the petroleum costs are going to go up in the future. Fortunately today, because of the competition and the lack of inflation, we don't believe that your increase is warranted, but we understand in the future you are going to have cost increase. That's why we want to sit down with you, understand what the overall cost burden that we need to achieve, both from your perspective and ours, set it to a rational way from an exaction standpoint so that we can build houses that people can afford. You can build the facilities that are necessary for you as a public agency to serve those houses that are being built, and then on an annual basis ensure that the cost that you are incurring is covered by our contribution to that process. So we would very much appreciate it if you would direct staff to work with us. I know that they are willing, and we would just like to hear it from you as well, so that we can sit down and come forward with a comprehensive review of this that works in the future. I believe that some of your costs are actually going to be warranted to increase, but I also believe that a bunch of your costs are going to be warranted to decrease. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yes, I do have one question. I haven't heard you make a recommendation on this specific item.
As in our letter, we would ask you to oppose it.
Thank you. Any other members of the board questions? Seeing none. Anybody else wish to address the board on this item? Good morning, Ms. Hanson.
Good morning. Julie Hanson, 1700 Eureka Road in Roseville, on behalf of various landowners in the South Placer area. For the last few months, there's been a group of us getting together in anticipation of coming to meet with your staff to talk about the cost structure, building permit fees and whatnot that, projects that your board has already approved will be paying, and how to make those projects viable. So it's frustrating when I know that the existing cost structure is already completely unsustainable for projects that are already approved in the county. And I know it may seem like only a small increase we're talking about in this fee, 1.6%, but 1.6% or 100% of zero is still zero. And until we get these projects going and start collecting fees, we need to we just need to think about this a little bit. It seems too easy, 1.6%, oh, that's just something easy to absorb. But I'm really concerned because we are so far off the mark in the region in terms of our fees and being able to build projects like Placer Vineyards and build projects like the Regional University. I just got back from that trip to Philadelphia where I sat down with the president of the university and the chairman of the board and trying to stress to them that we're going to do everything we could to reduce costs, because everything we can reduce in terms of cost for them is more money to build that university. And right now, certainly, and we know the market is bad, but even for the foreseeable future, with the fee structure we have right now in Placer County, we're in trouble. So I would urge you to vote no on this item before you today, and echo what Dennis said, and let's sit down and talk about what makes sense for fees and make sure that there's no loss in services. We want to have projects that have good services, and we've got good roads, but I think there's some things that we can go back and look at and work together. Obviously, it's a partnership with these projects in the county, these projects that are already approved. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to address the board at this time? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public hearing, bring it back to the board. Tom, did you have some?
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to clarify a couple of issues because there's a number of things have been raised here. Number one, the building industry and others asked us over a year ago to sit down with them and take a look at a variety of costs, operating costs, all those type of things. County staff said, sure, when you're ready, we'll do that. So the requests have been made, the request honored, and we're just waiting till they deem it appropriate to meet with us. And so I really don't think you need to provide any direction. We're there, but if you feel incumbent upon yourself to do that, great. Second thing is that there's a little bit of intertwining of different issues here. One's operating costs and one's capital costs. Today's issue, this item in particular, is simply what does it cost to build things and how do we collect the monies over time to build those. Quite frankly, if a project generates X amount of traffic that requires an interchange to be built, somebody's got to pay for that interchange. It needs to come from that project as a contributor of that. There is no other real funding source to generate that kind of money to build those facilities that new project is requiring the impact. So it has to mitigate. Sympathetic to the cost structure, but nonetheless, the existing taxpayers under your general plan do not subsidize development. That has to be paid for out of their pockets. The market needs to equalize to that fact. The consumer price index issue, or whatever we're calling this index, I think it would be probably telling, and maybe we need to continue this and look at another meeting, but those particular projects, let's pick it on the Sunset Interchange or Auburn Folsom Boulevard, those are in our fee programs based upon a estimated cost sometimes decades old, about what it costs to actually construct those things. Quite honestly, those are always argued about, what the cost of the interchange or the road improvements are to sustain that are necessary to serve new development are always argued about, and they usually come in pretty low. When we get ready to construct these things, we being the county at large, it's not unusual the county has to scrape up other dollars to make that work. The original premise is that these projects that serve predominantly new development are required to fully pay their mitigation fees to deliver the current day costs. So you will see over time high inflation, low inflation, but these are 20-year periods by which these funds have to be collected. And again, I'd welcome the review to take a look at. By the time we get ready to construct these things, undoubtedly we've had to come up with other monies beyond just the impact fees to fully fund these projects. So I think rather than, if there's an issue about this 1.6%, let's go back and look at that CIP program, make sure it is fully funded by new development, and then put in place whatever the cost adjustment is to do that. Because I think upon close examination, you will find that there's actually more of a contribution of other funds rather than the impact fees to fully fund these projects when they finally are construction, absent this little anomaly that we've had the last 2 years about lower prices.
Rocky.
It would be my feeling in listening to the testimony that, and I've said for some time now, I'd like to see us reduce costs where we can. And this would be one time that I don't want to see us raise the costs. So it sounds to me like that Tom is suggesting that we not vote on this today, that we actually sit down with the BIA and work and let staff work with them to see what they can come up with. And that would be my proposal, that we direct staff to have those conversations so we fully understand this and be on board with working for them, because I want them to start building something. And I just think that's the right thing to do.
Robert?
I guess I'll start by sort of embracing both Tom's and Rocky's comments. I think the important thing is that at the end of the day, our capital improvements projects costs are balanced by what we know we can collect in impact fees, and we only get one chance to do that. So if we are too low in those cost estimates, we will suffer from that development for the rest of time. So it's an important decision. The good news is the CPI cost adjustment is minimal because inflation is so low, but we do need to keep an eye on the fact that petroleum is starting to go back up generally, although I guess it went down yesterday. But I think it's a good time for a timeout and for us to get together with the group from the Building Industry Association, take a look at that broad policy question. And I don't think we're going to end the world if we continue this item for that opportunity to take place, and I think create a better understanding and communication, and have a good revisitation of some of those cost estimates as well as the impact it is having on projects going forward. I think there might be a lot of techniques by which we can address these issues, different phasing in certain projects that I can think of, a lot of other things, but at the end of the day, it's extremely important, I think, they actually do collect the impact fees that are necessary to make sure that the projects are whole and the planning is quality development in Placer County, and that we don't start cutting corners on that and pay the price for that 50 years down the road. But the economy has done a tremendous reset, and I think it's worthwhile taking a look at where there may be opportunities to look at things differently.
Supervisor Holmes.
Oh, I just want to say I do concur with Supervisor Rockholm's comments and Supervisor Wagner's comments as well.
And Supervisor Montgomery.
I'm actually in agreement as well. That may come as a surprise to some of you. I think it's important that we do sit down, we do have the conversation, we do understand the basis for these fees, and make sure that there really is a nexus created between imposition of the fees and the actual costs. Having said that, we may be back here at 1.6% in a couple of months, because it's all our responsibility to make sure that we don't place costs on existing property owners, that these are related specifically to new development and covering those costs. So I'm absolutely happy to defer a decision on this item today. I encourage that discussion and look forward to coming up with something that we really do have a basis to make a decision on. So.
The only thing that I would add is Tom, you made the comment about the perhaps the mixing of the message as it relates to capital costs versus operating costs, and while we need to be careful that we understand what the cost drivers are in each, I think it's also important for this board to understand that if either one is out of whack, projects don't get built. That if capital costs and the upfront fees that are required to mitigate those costs are too high, then you never have the opportunity to reach the debate in regard to the operating costs, and that if capital costs are in line that allow for an appropriate transfer of property at a market price, yet the ongoing operating costs are out of whack, you don't have a project that pencils either, because the odds of people buying a home that creates an encumbrance on them that they can't meet on an annualized basis is small, and we certainly need to be careful, as I know you have been, and we'll be hearing an item later this morning in regard to operating costs. And so, while yes, it's important for the board to bear in mind the difference between the fee structures that we set on those, understanding that if either one of them gets out of balance, then it affects the viability of those projects on a long-term basis. Supervisor Rockham?
I just want to make one more comment and thank Andrew and the work you've already done, and just encourage you to work with them and see what we come up with. But there's a lot of information here, and so you've obviously done a lot of work, so don't misconstrue what I'm saying, please.
So I think, Supervisor Rockham, you're looking for a motion to refer this back to staff and direct them to meet with interested parties in regard to, I think, reviewing not just this, but other fees associated with the development process?
That sounds like what I want to say.
We have a second? Second by Wygant. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Opposed? None? Thank you. Okay, we have the 950, which is the same presenter, but a different item.
Correct. This item is more technical in nature. It's more of cleanup items for the actual fee ordinance. And there's two parts to this. When the fee ordinance was adopted in 1996, they went through, and as you read through the ordinance, they refer to several exhibits, which consist of, it's like our fee zones, our fee tables, the trip generation rates, and what have you. And this is problematic for the county clerk and for everybody else. And so what we're asking to do is that remove those references, and that we publish already yearly booklets of the CIP and of the fee tables and everything else. And so we're saying, one, remove the language to the specific exhibits and just use a general reference to our fee schedule so we can make it easier for everybody. Doing this will not change the fees. It won't change how the fees are calculated. It won't change how they're collected or how they're spent. Okay, so that first portion. The second portion is that we're asking to add some specific language so that we can transfer funds between different districts. And specific case in point was the Auburn Folsom widening project, where we asked to do this last year. CEQA says for the fee ordinance, or the fee ordinance is set up to satisfy CEQA that these fees are a mitigation, and that we've established a traffic mitigation program for each district, and we're collecting fees specific to those improvements. And so to keep that, we have to be able to say that, yes, each fee is in each district, and they're happy with that. What we're asking now is that we have a formal process where we can transfer funds, like we did for Auburn Folsom, to make it easier to complete projects on a timely basis. Again, and we're asking that you hold a public hearing for this, and again, staff recommends that you approve these changes to the ordinance language.
Questions by staff? Or questions of staff, I'm sorry, questions by board members of staff. All right, seeing none, this is a public hearing. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Any members of the public wish to address the board on this item? Mr. Rogers.
Just really quick, and I just have one question. My understanding is this is to talk about transferring back and forth between districts is a part of it, correct?
It's two-part. Part number one is to obviate the need for the production of a separate document, I believe, and option number two, or part number two is to allow for the transfer between the districts.
So I just have one simple question. If a transfer happens and there's no collection in the area that the money was transferred to, and there's a need to build a project for a CEQA perspective or anything else in the area where the money came from, how's the money going to be repaid so that the project that in the donating district actually is able to be built in the time frame that is necessary? That's the question I have.
A fair question, one to which a tall gentleman behind you has a...
My name is Ken Graham with the Department of Public Works. Currently, our fee program countywide is broken down into different districts. In fact, today we have approximately $30 million in the bank to build projects. Unfortunately, those fees are all distributed over a host of different fee programs. There's not enough in any one fee program to do the substantial projects that are needed to mitigate for development. So for instance, Auburn Folsom, what we did is we talked about moving money, taking some of that $30 million and putting it to use for our citizens today. That's what the transfer allows. Granite Bay will have it. I guess there's always a theoretical it won't, and we'll have to make that up, much like we did with getting federal stimulus dollars, all sorts of different programs we use to make up any shortfalls in any of our projects. This will allow actual physical projects to take place today or soon, rather than waiting for those incremental dollars in each individual districts to collect up. That's the point of what transfers. The point of today's is we did it and got your okay to do it for Auburn Folsom. Bell Road 4 or 5 years ago, we did something similar, but that fee program is paying interest back to the other fee districts. We're trying to create a level playing field. It's not fair for the people or the development interests in Auburn to be paying interest while those in Granite Bay are not. We're trying to create that equality.
And those transfers of those fees would be brought to the board?
Mm-hmm. Correct. They need to have your concurrence, period, just like the previous two have. And part of this action, though, is to let you know that we are also asking to do it for the Bell Road project at this time. No others, but to make that whole.
Tom wanted to add something.
Yeah, let me just, I think, more on the spot of Mr. Rogers' question there, is that each one of our individual fee programs are predicated on a projected development with each one of those areas. So they are whole in and of themselves. So even if there's a transfer of money to a receiving district, that district has already been analyzed to generate future fees that will go back to repay that loan. And when it comes to the mitigation of projects, so a project isn't left, let's say, hanging because of an undelivered project, that is taken into account in the CEQA analysis, that there is a fee program that is established that will provide for whatever that improvement is on a timely basis consistent with the project impact. So that is taken into account in the CEQA analysis.
Kirk, if I could.
Robert, go ahead.
Just, Dennis, maybe to help resolve your concerns, if I understand them correctly, that when this has happened in the past, one thing I can assure you is that what each supervisor does in representing their particular district is that if I'm lending funds to, let's say, Kirk, I want to make sure that any capital improvement project in my district is not only going to be left whole, but it's not going to be delayed in time as to the delivery. So that's usually vetted pretty thoroughly by staff during the board discussion.
I think it's a fantastic idea because obviously that helps you utilize resources in the most effective and efficient way. What I'm concerned about is just at the end of the day, if I have a member who has to have a project delivered for a CEQA mitigation measure that has a timing associated with it, and they have enough money in their bucket of funds, but it got sent someplace else for very good reasons, how are we going to make sure that that bucket of funds has enough money in it to make sure that that project's delivered? That's the only question we have. I mean, because otherwise I think it's great. As someone who lives in Folsom and drives into Roseville to work every day, I greatly appreciate the construction that's going on Folsom Auburn Road. So, thanks.
By the way, it's Auburn Folsom in Placer County. Not Folsom Auburn. You're showing your Sacramento County prejudice when you say Folsom Auburn. That's right. Stop digging. Supervisor Montgomery?
Ken, I wanted to make sure I understood what you said. These transfers will be brought in front of the Board of Supervisors to review and approve?
I think the way it's written today, it doesn't require actually the approval. It'll probably, I think the exact word is concurrence, or, but if you like, we can make it officially. It says the board is notified. So if you would, you can change it to be the board will approve.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about just the board is notified of the transfer or loan. That sounds like it could actually happen after in this language. I would be more comfortable with something that very clearly delineated that these would be brought in front of the Board of Supervisors, who would need to review and approve
Prior to it
the
actually
transfers prior to it.
I looked at county council about how, maybe with the motion, that can just be made as a change. I don't think there's any problem. Our intent is to make sure the board is fully aware. It's important to know how much is in the bigger pot, and I think that goes to Mr. Rogers' concern. We have 30 million. Do you ever want to take that down to $1 million? Probably not. But making use of that resource is going to be important for our citizens in the future, for the transportation infrastructure that's required.
Thank
But
you.
no problem.
And Jerry, should we just make that part of any motion coming out in this?
Yes, part of the motion, that it's subsection P4 will be modified to the board, is notified to the board shall approve of the transfer of the loan.
Thank you.
That's a motion.
Well, we're not done with the public hearing. We've only heard from one member of the public, so we're still in the public hearing. We haven't closed. Any other members of the public wish to address the board on this item? Okay, we'll close public hearing, bring it back to the board, and I believe a motion was ready to be made. Would you mind turning your mic? Thank you.
Turn myself back off. Sorry about that. Get to the language here. Move approval of an ordinance modifying county code regarding countywide traffic mitigation fees with section P4 amended as discussed to read the board will approve of the transfer or loan.
Second.
We have a motion, Montgomery, second Rockholm. Any comments on the motion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you very much. Moving on with Public Works Center, 10 o'clock timed item. This is dissolution of zone of benefit 172 in County Service Area Number 28 regarding Mandarin Hill Estates. Good morning, Mr. Costa. How are you?
Good morning. How are you? Before you today is a request for your board to consider the dissolution of zone of benefit number 172 in County Service Area 28. And this is associated with the 9-lot Mandarin Hill Estates subdivision in Penryn. This action was initiated by a petition signed by 100% of the current landowners within that development. The petition was presented to your board on March 2nd, at which time the board adopted a resolution of intention to hold this public hearing regarding the elimination of the extended public services and the associated assessments. This zone of benefit was established as part of the subdivision approval process in April 2002. The extended services provided through the zone include long-term road surface rehabilitation, storm drain maintenance, and fire suppression water tank maintenance and replacement. The Mandarin Hill Estates owners are proposing that these services be provided through their homeowners association. They have provided documentation acceptable to staff in the local fire protection districts supporting that shift of responsibility. Fire district officials have requested that the subdivision CCNRs be amended to include some very specific provisions for inspection, maintenance, repairs, and access related to the private fire suppression facilities, and these have been incorporated into that document. The two subdivision streets, Mandarin Hill Road and Mandarin Hill Court, are currently public roads and are proposed to be abandoned as part of the next subsequent action here. While the owners have indicated their desire to create a gated community, there is no gate approved for this project, and any such approval would require a separate application be submitted through the Community Development Resource Agency. Since its formation in 2002, the only administrative costs that have been charged to this account, the current account balance is approximately $43,500. Per the requirements of the California Government Code, these funds must be used for the purpose in which they were collected. Therefore, the staff's requested action includes authorization for the Public Works Director to prepare an agreement with the Homeowners Association addressing the management and use of the remaining funds. CSA Extended Public Services are fully funded through charges levied to the landowners, so this action will not have any impact on county road or general funds. The requested action of your board are to conduct a public hearing to consider all protests, then, if there is adequate support, to adopt a resolution to dissolve County Service Area 28, Zone of Benefit 172, ceasing all extended services and related charges, and directing the Public Works Director to execute an agreement with the Mandarin Hills Homeowners Association for the disposition of uncommitted and unexpended funds.
Questions of staff? Okay, seeing none. This is a public hearing, so we'll go ahead and open the public hearing regarding the dissolution of the zone of benefit. Any members of the public wish to address the board on this item?
Good morning, members of the board, staff. My name is Kerry Kambanis. I'm one of the owners of some lots in this homeowners association. We've been working with this with the staff for about 2.5 years now, and I just wanted to thank them, and we look forward to the further meeting that we're going to have regarding the agreement as to what we do with the funds. But thanks for your time.
You are speaking in support of the staff's recommended action, then?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to address the board on this item? All right, we'll go ahead and close public hearing, bring it back to the board for questions or for a motion.
Move approval of the item.
Second.
Motion Supervisor Holmes, second by Wygant, to approve the dissolution of Zone of Benefit 172 in County Service Area Number 28. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you very much. Now we will move on to, by reference, were you looking for the incorporation of the abandonment resolution, or do we need a separate motion?
We'll handle that separately.
Okay, so this is not a public hearing on the abandonment of the public easement, but anybody from the public wish to address the board on this item, we'll take those comments now. And seeing none, do we have a motion on the item?
Move approval of 4B.
Okay.
Second.
Motion by Holmes, second by Wygant, to approve the abandonment of the public easement for Mandarin Hill Road and Mandarin Hill Court. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Opposed? None. Thank you very much. Moving right on to our 10:15 item. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate your time. Moving on to our 10:15 item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back in February of this year, the Planning Commission approved a conditional use permit for Livingston's concrete project. That action was appealed, and in reviewing the appeal, staff has concluded that additional analysis is required. Staff is requesting, and both the applicant and appellant have agreed to continue action to the August 24th, 2010 agenda. It's important to note that additional notification will go out to all interested parties to make sure they are aware and so that they will be able to participate in that hearing in August. The action before you today is to agree to continue to the August 24th agenda.
Okay. Any members of the public wish to address the board on the continuance of this item to our August 24th board agenda? All right, seeing none. Supervisor Holmes?
Move approval of extending the hearing until August 24th, 2010. Second.
Motion by Holmes, second by Rockholm, to continue this item to August 24. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead into our 10:30 timed item. This is Allison, I believe, will be presenting this item on behalf of the County Executive Office. Thank you, Reggie.
Good morning. Allison Carlos with the County Executive Office. There we go. This morning here with Jim Durfee, we're going to do a joint presentation on Agenda Item 6, Service Delivery Options. And I just want to begin by saying there have been a number of departments who have been very instrumental in helping frame up some of the information thus far, as well as various staff from the County Executive Office. All of our principals have been very much involved in this, and just want to thank all. At the February 23rd board meeting, the executive officer was directed to return this fiscal year with concepts for long-term structural changes for future services in Placer
You
County.
said the executive officer was directed.
Yes, it was an action of the board.
I don't know why I heard arrested. I don't know.
We can read about that tomorrow, I suppose.
I'm sure it's already up on a blog somewhere.
Oh, that's right, Twitter. Okay, there it is.
I reported as news.
Yeah. While it's recognized that local government, we currently do provide services in a variety of ways, the idea moving forward is to acknowledge that these service selections through a more formalized methodological process would be helpful to us. And it would incorporate your board's interest, it would recognize the efforts by departments, and it would implement recommendations from the Organizational Cost-Saving Subcommittee Task Force. Your board has taken numerous actions to implement the various cost-saving task force subcommittee recommendations over the past months. And for some context, we've prepared this chart, which identifies the relationship between the organizational cost-saving task force and this service delivery review effort that we're undertaking. That subcommittee on January 12th had recommended that you consider an alternative service delivery mechanic being in contracting of services. So we just want to make sure that we correlate for you that linkage. In proceeding, key interests are suggested to guide actions and assessment processes, and that would be to ensure cost-effective, high-quality services, valuing employees, focusing on assessments while considering structure of new workforces there is attrition, maintaining flexibility, ensuring services are sustainable, so that there's any basically, as there's any collection or is there a choice for a particular service model that may be of interest, that we are clear that it can sustain over time. And we're recognizing the benefits of considering all sectors, public, for-profit, nonprofit, creating constructive competition by all sectors putting their best foot forward. Every day in the media, we're seeing reports of governments across the state and across the country assessing how they're doing services or if the services should even continue. Although this has been described in numerous reports to your board, we're just going to reiterate a couple of points. Operating revenues and resources available to the county have declined substantially in the last years, even at a point where there is no longer a quote-unquote decline, economic recovery, and the associated revenues are expected to come back somewhat slowly. Current economic data suggests that while there are sparks here and there, the recovery is at best fragile and really protracted. The Sacramento region in particular is expected to lag behind with double-digit unemployment rates for 2 to 4 years, which is affecting, among other things, consumer spending and the housing markets. Therefore, past peak funding levels are not expected for Placer County for quite some time. Also, we are anticipating workforce retirement eligibility growth in the near future, and as you know, the county OPEB's obligation, it continues to increase significantly as our workforce does reach retirement age, and our pension benefits are growing in part due to the effects of CalPERS portfolio losses. In reviewing the service delivery concept, I would again note that Placer County already practices some of this. By establishing a framework for assessing options for how services can be provided in the future, through attrition, we can incorporate services review processes into our business practices. And we see that as local governments more as conveners and conveyors and brokers for services, that we do recognize that competitive benefit of all sectors. For example, if the government sector is the most efficient and otherwise cost-effective and best use of tax dollars for providing services, then that theoretically would be the model. Of course, to have a competitive edge and use of public sector workforce efficiency is key. And then also we do want to note that we do want to always consider that there's restructuring or process improvement opportunities that may achieve material cost savings that we don't want to ignore. For decades, local governments have increasingly embraced strategies for providing cost-effective delivery of services. And according to study data, recent years have seen many of the service models used. The fundamental one and primary one is still public sector employees. Alternatives are being used, such as agencies contracting with other agencies or just contracting with for-profits or nonprofits. Of interesting note, some studies do identify that there was a peak for for-profit contracting around 1997, with a slight decline in 2002 where it's remained relatively flat. At the same time, there's been some growth in the government-to-government or agency-to-agency, which would then suggest that there's some implementation of government reforms and increased cooperative competition. In addition to public sector employees, the list that we have here is those services are typically rendered through public employees, as I mentioned. Contracting or privatization is often used. Agreements or contracts for governments, between governments, which is intergovernmental. And there are some other things such as the reverse privatization concept, which probably the closest relationship or example we have of that is like the Empower program. Clearly, our county staff is contracted where we would have otherwise had some outside contracting. I do want to highlight that contracting is popular and it's very credible, with sometimes savings averaging 5 to 30% of cost. But it is very important to caution that we need to look at it from a sustainable standpoint. Good contract management or development and management is critically important. Having readily available sources within the region for delivery is critical. And the monitoring of the provider to ensure that the performance is occurring is also very important. For intergovernmental, it is often very convenient in times of economic downturn, and it has to be really understood how that will affect long-term delivery of that service if it's selected. Within this slide, there are a few examples of existing use of service delivery options that we're currently using in Placer County. Attachment to your staff report has a broader list, but we still are working to do a far more encompassing list for what is occurring in Placer County. We have the custodial services at the Santucci Justice Center, to child abuse prevention. I won't go through them all. Transit, of course, is one that we readily do in an intergovernmental capacity. In framing the service evaluation approach, the common elements in reviewing the program's current model and options, as well as any options, typically would include looking at the history, the legal framework, the regulatory framework, the policy implications, including those effects to the community, labor implications, again, that's sustainability, and considering, again, the various sectors. We can't leave off the process improvement aspect, or just deciding whether or not the service is still necessary. Staff did begin developing some draft evaluation tools that can be used and modified to work for various departments, and the goal is to have common methodology to the extent it's practical, but also to create comparisons so that there's apples for apples, really. If comparing a public sector service model to a contract, we really do want to have a true comparison of who's performing the service, who's performing the direct services, who's doing the management, and who's performing the support services. I think sometimes we forget to examine how and who is performing the work, thereby at times underrepresenting the overall value added. So the next slide I'm going to show, even if you squint your eyes, you probably can't see it too good. So I just want to forewarn you on that. And it really is for demonstration purposes only. And you do have a hard copy if it would help you at all. But, and Jim might want to make some comments about this. I think you're pretty good.
The challenge for the departments was to put all of the pertinent information into those boxes.
Yeah, you have to put it in the box. Anyway, the idea again is to, if you look at it, you really have an ability to roll up some summarized information that really is well oriented to look at apples to apples, but it does look at in the context of current service and then any alternatives that you may also be examining. So again, just for the example, if you're looking at how the work is performed section, it really does require that you are identifying who's performing what services and at what level, so that as you roll through alternative to alternative, that is shifting. You're able to account for it in the ultimate cost delivery, and then you're very clear about how the service is being performed by a contractor, how the intergovernmental would be performing the services, and it really helps to validate the overall integrity. So with that, I won't go into too much more detail. I just think the point of showing this was to emphasize we are working on some various tools that can be helpful to folks, and they help frame that clear picture of the service, the current service versus any other service. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the microphone over to Jim Durfee, and he's going to complete a few slides here.
Thank you, Allison. Again, for the record, Jim Durfee, I'm the Director of the Facility Services Department, and Facility Services was tasked with applying the methodologies and the tool that Allison talked about to a prospective function within the county so that we could go through this evaluation and provide options for consideration for service delivery. In this case, we selected the new, or about to be new, Dry Creek Community Park. Your board is aware that in the Dry Creek Community Plan area, we are developing the first phase of a community park there. We are currently under design. We intend to be in construction by next spring with delivery of that facility for public use, hopefully before the end of next calendar year. Part of putting together a parks operation is determining how you're going to maintain and operate that park once it's open. The methodology that Facility Services has used now for a number of years for all of our park sites, and we do this for our building maintenance and custodial operations as well, is that we have what we call maintenance management plans. They are a well thought out, structured approach to estimating and then later tracking all of the tasks that go into maintaining a given facility. We put those together based on tasks, the amount of time required to perform a given task on a daily, weekly, monthly, and annual basis, and then we're able to sort that data in a lot of different ways. Utilizing that maintenance management plan was very key to how we are going through the assessment tools and coming up with particular options for your board to consider for the operation of that park as we move down the road. As Allison talked about, we do have the assessment tool that is currently in the development phase, but we use that as the framework for how we went through our analysis. As we put the data from our maintenance management plans into the assessment tool, it became very, very apparent that in the case of the Dry Creek Community Park, that labor was the very significant, the majority cost driver in the estimated cost of managing that park. As a matter of fact, that labor, and this assumes our existing model of using skilled county employees to do all of the work at the park. Our estimate for the cost of that was about $315,000 per year. About 80% of that total was labor under our current model. So knowing that labor was really the high cost driver in terms of that operation of that park, it was obvious that we needed to look at labor and how to either reduce the amount of labor or provide that labor in a different way as a way to provide the board with options for determining how to proceed. We looked at two different models. We looked at privatization of specific maintenance tasks. We didn't really look at fully turnkey privatizing the entire site, and I'll get into that in a minute. And then we also looked at intergovernmental contracting. The data that we used for intergovernmental contracting was the various consulting reports that put together the cost analyses for the major land use projects in the West Placer area, Placer Vineyards and Regional University specifically. We had gone through this analysis and we just refreshed that information so that we would have estimated costs for contracting with other government agencies for the operation of the park. And then we used real-time contract information based on both our own experiences and data that we gathered from other jurisdictions in terms of per square foot or per acre contract costs for specific tasks. In looking at, I'm going to switch back to the maintenance management plans now. In looking at those plans, there were large blocks of time in labor, in terms of labor, that were dedicated to tasks that are readily available in the local contract market. So what we did was we confined our look at contractable services to things that we knew were readily available in the market, which is one of the reasons we didn't go towards a more turnkey approach, was because that particular approach is not as readily available in the local market. So we looked at tasks like mowing, edging, sidewalk and parking lot, sweeping and cleaning, restroom maintenance, those tasks that were very, very readily available, and we were able to come up with a set of tasks that reduced the amount of labor by about 25%, 20 to 25% of the total labor, and resulted in about a $61,000 per year savings in the management of the park. Under this particular model, what would happen would be there would be county staff person at the park, basically full-time, doing the more skilled labor aspects of maintenance of the park, managing the irrigation system, doing the more skilled building maintenance tasks, taking care of pruning and so forth. That person would not be responsible for riding on a lawnmower, pushing a lawnmower, those tasks that were more readily available in the local market. This leaves us a person at the park available for the direct public contact, which Facility Services believes is an important component of what we provide. It also has someone on site full-time doing contract inspections, making sure that the contractors are doing the things that they are being contracted to do. So with that, I'm going to turn this essentially back over to Allison. And I apologize for not moving through these. This particular table was included in your package, and it simply shows in a very straightforward basis the reduction in labor between the three models and the resultant savings in costs. So unless your board has immediate questions for me, I'm going to turn the microphone back to Allison for a wrap-up.
I do actually have a question on that slide. What your costs as reflected there in the $315,000 a year under the existing service model? What drives what are those costs additive of? What are you counting there?
It includes virtually everything involved in the maintenance of that particular park. It includes all of the labor on site. It includes the management and support labor that goes into managing the facility. It includes all of the equipment and supplies and utilities that are incorporated in an annual budget estimate.
So it's just your annual operating cost. Is there a factor in there for the ongoing cost of the employee at retirement as well?
Yes.
There is a factor in
that is factored in. We applied a fully loaded hourly cost for the two job classifications that we would assign to that. Our fully loaded costs include 100% of the labor, benefits, the internal overhead in terms of managing the department and the parks operation, and it also includes the annual payments that we make for OPEB on top of that as well.
Okay, so not just the ARC while the employee is employed is assumed, but also the ongoing actuarial estimates of that employee after retirement.
That's correct, and Tom may want to expand on that, but we make an annual payment for that as well.
The current, as your board is aware, the ARC, the annual payment is a payroll facet. Right. Excuse me. But what this doesn't...
would obviously be included in there.
Right. So this would probably take into account more of the likelihood of an existing employee relocating to the site and then that being paid. Under the current board policy, if a new employee were hired, a new allocation were created, then it would be $130,000 up front, but you'd have to appropriate that over the years. Excuse me.
You got a bottle of water over there.
So it's a little bit different in terms of the cost structure. New employee versus an existing employee.
And Tom is correct. We did not assume a new employee with the upfront payment. This assumes our current cost for employees at that job level, okay, which includes the annual payment.
It is indeed a point in time, meaning that it reflects our current PERS payment, not where PERS has told us for the next several years we can expect an increase of about 2% per year. So this is a point in time. If you did this a year from now, it'd probably be a higher differential. But we don't know what the private option would be also a year from now.
So, in other words, that cost does assume the estimated ongoing taxpayer obligation to meet the pension and OPEB benefits of the employee that would be performing that duty.
As it currently stands, okay. Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, Jennifer?
Yes. On a couple of questions. On the privatization, I want to make sure I understand. It is not the intention, if we go to privatization, to get rid of existing employees. These would be to supplement the existing employees we have and redirect them to other needs within the county.
The concept right now is being implemented through as attrition occurs. So to be very clear, the way the rollout would occur, and the new Dry Creek Park is an excellent example because it's a new park. It doesn't affect existing staff. We discussed a little bit in the presentation this concept for valuing our existing staff and having an implementation that is respectful of the fact that attrition is going to be occurring, and we would be doing this as attrition is occurring.
So it would not be the intention to lay people off in order to achieve a privatization goal?
It's not the intention to do that.
Okay. My second question is under the existing service model, understanding that that number has long-term obligations, including retirement, have we done any sort of analysis on what the recently passed federal legislation having to do with health care and health care costs might do to that number?
How that, if I understand your question correctly, are you asking how that legislation might affect the contract costs?
No, I'm wondering how it would affect the cost of our existing employees, county employees.
No, we have not done that.
And we've asked on that note, if I might interject, we've asked personnel to review the federal legislation, recognizing it takes 3 to 4 years to implement. There's a lot of what-ifs involved in that. And at a subsequent board meeting, we expect them to come back and at least do the best tea leaf reading that they can relative to that. There is a couple of things we know for certain right away that affect us this year. There's a provision in there that we have to provide to our employees the opportunity that their children who are 26 can come back on the county rolls. The current cutoff has to deal with whether or not they're in college, and I think it usually caps out about 22. So we are already looking for an increased cost in health care relative to the adult children coming back on their parents' rolls that are not reflected in these figures.
Right, and I understand there's a short-term cost associated with that. I'm concerned with the longer-term cost for the county because that's our role, to look at the long-term costs and benefits to the county for all of this.
Any other questions yet? Okay. It's also, since we're on this topic and we're discussing contracting, it is timely to also just remind the board that, the county charter is helpful in this regard, the section 302H, where it does acknowledge that service delivery option authority is there for contract services, as it may be more economical to do that. And so we do have that helps to put this into a context of what the county's interests are and ensuring that we are delivering the best cost-effective and efficient and effective service for the taxpayer dollar. The other thing I would like to highlight, too, and I don't know if there's any other comment on it, but we did receive a letter from the Roseville Chamber of Commerce in support of the county looking at alternative service delivery models. That did come from Aldo Panesci, the president of the Roseville Chamber of Commerce. And he's citing that there has, in his recollection, there has been 20 to 30% savings when there is contract services involved. So the staff recommendations are that you would affirm the county's continued use of service delivery options and process improvement implementation, and authorize the county executive officer to, in cooperation with the department heads, and I do want to highlight there, a lot of them did come in that have been working on this, so wanted to acknowledge them, that you would, in cooperation with county departments, to evaluate further practical use of these service delivery options and return to your board with implementation recommendations. And then direct Jim, the Facility Services Director, to proceed with implementation of service delivery options based upon the new Dry Creek Park. And so those would be the recommendations we would have for you today for your action. And again, would like to thank all the department heads who have come in, as well as staff and County Executive Office, our principals, Becky Reagan, Jennifer Merchant, Jeff Bell, and Teresa Leonard. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions by board members? Supervisor Rockholm.
I just going to make more of a comment that I think absolutely this is the right way to go. Share a story of about a company in Roseville that I won't mention the name. They decided to privatize their fleet services, and don't anybody in this room interpret this, so that's what I'm recommending we do. I'm just sharing a story with you. And by doing so, they found a very efficient cost savings amount, and it amounted in the first year to $800,000, which are real dollars. Today, the cost of government just keeps going up and up, and we really don't turn a profit. In other words, we don't do everything perfectly all the time. I think we need to concentrate on the core things we do. Public safety, for example, police and fire. We need to, and then health and human services. Some of the things there, but I think we need to look for opportunities to save the taxpayers money and reduce the cost of doing business. And in the case of this company in Roseville, the employees that were working in a particular area, they were actually, the majority of them were hired by the company. So it was just a transition for them. And but I think this is the way to go. This is a wave of the future, and this is what people that are paying the taxes are going to look for us to do.
Supervisor Wyatt.
I just want to commend staff for what I think is really excellent work and puts us solidly, and I think for us it's actually more of a nuanced change than a dramatic change, but it's a significant one. So I really enjoyed reading what I read and seeing what I've seen. Just one also nuanced, perhaps, perspective that similar to Rocky's story, I guess, but when I actually used to work for a living, I was in aviation, and my opinion of the business is that the best airline in the business is Southwest Airline. And they have, a lot of the airlines have grown by simply starting to absorb tasks that they would sub out just because it was a big dollar amount to them, not necessarily thinking any further. In many instances, that strategy did not serve them really well, but Southwest Airline, before they would make that decision, would look to see if there was competition inherent in the market for that particular service, noting that the competition would hone the quality and cost effectiveness of that particular service or need. And if there was competition, they just bid out those jobs as compared to just assuming that they could grow and do it more efficiently. So when staff is trying to implement a lot of this, I think if they look out in the market and if there appears to be a function where there's a lot of competition, you can probably assume that the market is actually honing the delivery of that value pretty well.
Okay, and realizing that I do intend to open it up to public for comment. Jennifer, did you want to ask questions of staff or make comments at this point, or would you like to wait until?
Why don't you open it up to public comment first? Thank you.
Okay. Any members of the public wish to address the board on this item?
Hi, I'm Chuck Thiel. I'm a business representative for Stationary Engineers Local 39, the union representing the Placer the Placer County employees. The reason that privatization peaked and then declined in the late 90s was because municipalities found that it actually didn't work. They weren't getting the cost savings that they thought they were. In the early 90s, they actually said that privatization was the wave of the future, and it just didn't pan out. The loss of control and the loss of quality and the related costs often make privatization for economic reasons a mistake in the long run. Furthermore, I heard that no employees were going to get laid off, yet we have 18 people that are sitting on a layoff list right now, and some of those have been reassigned to do parks and grounds work currently with facility services, and those folks would take those jobs. So don't feel comfortable that you're not laying anybody off. You're laying real people off right now. They have names, they have families. You don't have to pay the upfront OPEB liability by keeping those people employed. Furthermore, internally, the union's been discussing holding organizing campaigns for those private sector contractors that are looking to our bargaining unit to take work. So there'll be a cost associated with that, too, that the contractors should be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to address the board? Yes, please.
Thank you. Barbara Vasano with the Sheriff's Department. I want to commend the CEO and the board for reviewing this matter. Every year with the climbing costs for the past 10 years, cost of business has been increasing. Along with that is the service delivery model of the county. Some years ago, the Government Finance Officers of America and finance and counties and cities throughout the country have been reviewing just this question and looking at what is the best and most cost-effective, the best practices, and the most efficient. And in that line, just to kind of reiterate what Robert and the board have indicated, is that competition, not just between the private companies, but within the county internally. One of the suggestions is that those county departments also look to the quality control and compete with those private vendors to see really what the best model in providing that service is. We have looked to the county executive and the board in the past years in continuing to reduce our budgets and our costs. Some of that has come with the cost to reducing funding for our operational positions and having that control over. We don't have or have not had a lot of control over choosing the service delivery or the type of service in some of the other venues. We've done that a little bit in the past year or two with Fleet in some of the outlying areas in Tahoe, and it has had much success in providing both the benefit to the county and a lower cost to the department. And so as far as the monitoring and management, as Allison mentioned, that is a true cost. We are doing that now, so that's a true cost with our department now, even with our existing departments. I think now, as mentioned, there are some reduced staffing costs that are coming way. There are people that are looking to retire, and if any time was the right time to do it, I think this would, as mentioned, would be that right time to review that, see what's the best way to deliver those services to the county most effectively and efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll bring it back to the board. Question for staff. I'm sorry, Jennifer, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, please.
Okay. First, I want to thank you for all the work that you and your fellow participants put into this. It's obviously a lot of time and effort to come up with these recommendations. I have concerns that I share with Chuck about moving to privatization in such a way that it would adversely impact existing employees. I have some comfort with moving towards privatization as one option today. Our slide just went away. But the reason I have that level of comfort is because those decisions, thank you, on bullet point 2, need to come back to this board before those actions are taken. And when those suggestions for service delivery option changes, or maybe staying the same, meaning using county employees, come back to this board, I will certainly expect to see a full analysis, including impacts on existing employees for all of these options, whatever they may be. I think there probably is a role, a limited role for privatization. It's going to need to be proven to me. I think we should really be focusing on inter and intra-governmental exchanges. I see them working very well in the east end of the county, particularly because we do have such sparse population. We partner with Nevada County. We partner with the Tahoe City PUD on parks, particularly, and that's been very effective. So I think that's a role we should really be looking at very closely and very strongly. How do we partner with existing other agencies and jurisdictions and with our own internal departments working across departments? So I would suggest that we look very closely at that and try to really analyze, is that our first and best choice? And that's really where we should be putting our emphasis. Talking about the park specifically, I would encourage us on that topic that we talk to the Tahoe City PUD, again, potentially about managing the Squaw Valley Park. They already manage pretty much all our other parks up there, and I just think it's kind of a no-brainer unless there's something out there that's a real reason we can't do that. I had a conversation with Cindy Gustafson last week, and it was certainly something that she was open to discussion. So that's just, again, a great example of a partnership that works. That's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Okay. You mentioned that privatization was tried in the early 90s and that by the end of the 90s people were moving away from it because the cost savings weren't being realized. And yet the reason that I asked the questions that I asked about the fully burdened cost is precisely why GASB 45 was adopted in July of 2004. It's because during the 90s when we tried privatization as the quote-unquote experiment, we weren't getting a true apples-to-apples comparison. We were hiding the cost, the long-term employee obligation from the public when we were making these comparisons. And now that we make these comparisons, we see very clearly that on an apples-to-apples basis, as Robert indicated, market forces work. And so I'm encouraged that staff continues to look at this, and staff will continue to have my full support as we move forward down this road. Allison?
I just wanted to make a couple of points that, yeah, in the late 90s, the data would suggest that it just was more the end of the growth spurt. So then it kind of went flat. So it didn't dive after that and go away as a concept. But then there has been some growth in intergovernmental, as you say. And then I think the thing, too, about what staff is proposing is it is a process of transparency, and it's a built-in process to the business practice for reviewing services as we have those opportunities. And so it's more than solely just a privatization. It really is an evaluation to determine the best way services can be provided. So I think it is set up to be transparent and to provide for the various options to be looked at.
Thank you for that clarification. All right. I'm sorry? Yes, that was going to be next on the list.
I make a motion that we affirm Placer County's continued use of service delivery options and implementation of process improvements and best business practices. Authorize the executive director in cooperation with county departments to evaluate further practical use of service delivery options and return to your board with implementation recommendations, and direct the facilities director to proceed with implementation of service delivery options based on the new Dry Creek plan.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, Rockholm, second. I think Holmes snuck it in there, so we'll go with that. Supervisor Montgomery, under the motion, did you have a comment?
I did have just a bit of clarification under discussion here. Is when we're looking at this third point, direct facility services director to proceed with the implementation of service delivery options based upon the new Dry Creek Park, this is just to proceed with the analysis or to proceed with a recommendation based on the chart in here that we go to privatization?
The way I would interpret that, and my boss may jump in on this as he chooses, the way I would interpret that is that I would return to your board in the future with a very specific set of recommendations for how we would apply either intergovernmental contracting or this task-specific privatization for further discussion and adoption by your board. I don't believe that you're authorizing me to go cut contracts with anybody.
Thank you.
All right. If there are no other comments or questions on the motion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Allison.
Having dutifully exhausted all of our our time items, we had a couple of items that were removed from consent. We'll go ahead and pick those up. Those were items 22, A, B, and C. So we will go ahead and proceed with item 22A, and I'm assuming, Tom, that would be...
Yes. On 22A is a merit request increase. It is specific to Devin Bell, undersheriff, reference a grade and step. So it resulted in an increase from $71.13 per hour, or excuse me, to that amount. I might mention, as part of the background, is that the board in a previous meeting did direct staff to return to, starting next fiscal year as of July 1, or thereabouts, so it fit the fiscal year budget seasons, to suspend merits for the management group, and also directed staff to meet with PPO and DSA to accomplish the same for next year's merits, to suspend those. So this one is being, I believe, processed in accordance with the board's direction, initiating a suspension process starting next fiscal year.
Okay. Rocky, did you have a question or comment on that?
I just wanted to make a comment that I'm going to reluctantly support this because I don't want to single out, and I've said this before, any one employee. We're going to look at changing this rule and how these are administered, but I've already realized that there's going to be some unintended consequences, and it's going to be seen in our rank and file when that's how they get their raises, merit increases, or whatever, our step increases would be, I guess, more appropriately. But at least, to reiterate that we are looking at a better way to doing this. But our ordinance is clear, and I don't really think we have the authority to say no until we change this ordinance to read in a different manner. So I will be supporting it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Do we have a motion on the approval of item 22A? Motion Holmes, second Wygant to approve item 22A. Roll call, please.
Holmes? Aye. Montgomery? No. Rockholm?
Yes.
Wygant? Yes. Euler?
Aye. Item 22B.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, what this item B and C are somewhat companion items. One is adopt a resolution regarding the county office closures for the 5 days of July 2nd, August 2nd, September 3rd, October 8th, and November 12th, 5 mandatory closure days in this 2010. And then also to, as C states, approve a voluntary time off program for next fiscal year, starting July 1 for the entire year for the Placer Public employees, organizational employees. I believe Therese Leonard, perhaps with the assistance of Michael Boyle, will present this item or respond to any questions you may have about this.
Okay. Members of the board have any questions on the item? If not, any members of the public wish to speak to this item?
Hello again, I'm Chuck Thiel, business representative for Stationary Engineers, Local 39, representing the Placer County employees in the Professional and General Bargaining Unit. I'm here today to speak to you about this item regarding furloughs and office closures and to respond to a letter from the County Executive's Office. The letter states that the county and the union are at impasse over the MTO work furlough bargaining and that the county has no intention to take the issues to mediation. This unilateral decision to skip mediation and implement work furloughs is disappointing, and we're asking that the county reconsider and continue to negotiate towards a collaborative conclusion. The union has made proposals that would meet the county's desire for cost savings without harm to working families and the local economy. Due to the fact that the county's proposals never changed and the responses to the union proposals were a consistent no, it's hard to believe that the county representatives had any intent to truly negotiate an agreement. The county's stated intent with the work furlough proposal was to save money. The union proposals did that. It is our position that declaring impasse is premature due to the fact that both the county and the union are on the same page, in regards to reducing costs. Where we differ is in how the cost savings are achieved. Furthermore, the county is refusing to meet with a mediator. The lack of willingness to refer the disputes to mediation is a sad commentary on the county's regard for labor relations and the respect it has for its employees. At the last Board of Supervisors meeting, the union proposed a voluntary separation program. This proposal has been rejected by the county in both furlough discussions and layoff impact bargaining. The voluntary separation program has the potential to save more money than anything the county has yet to propose. This gives the appearance that the county is more interested in causing harm than it is in lowering costs. The voluntary separation program encourages employees to vacate positions they can afford to leave instead of laying off employees that can least afford to lose a job or that can least afford a work furlough. The costs associated with the voluntary separation program are quickly recouped, whereas unemployment leaves a lasting burden on the county as employees are eligible for up to 18 months of unemployment and subsidized COBRA benefits in the event of a layoff. In closing, I would like to state that if the true goal is to cut costs, then we are not at impasse. Instead, we should move into mediation in the spirit of collaboration and achieve that goal. However, if the county's true goal is to cause unnecessary harm to the county's workforce, the community, and local businesses, then impasse should be declared because it's not an outcome that the union will be party to. Thank you.
Anyone else? I have a question. I'm not sure who I should direct it to. Perhaps Mr. Boyle. Notwithstanding what we just heard, what I'm looking at is a resolution solely regarding 5 MTO days. Has nothing to do with other retirement-related issues or layoff-related issues, just 5 MTO days.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
I seem to recall that some kind of formal action was filed by the Public Employees Union against the county as a result of our imposition of MTO days in the past, correct?
That is correct also, Mr. Chairman.
And that we reached a resolution with the Public Employees Union where within that resolution we negotiated with them the ability for the county to unilaterally impose up to 5 MTO days as a result of that negotiated settlement. Was that not correct? Am I missing something?
It also included a duty upon the county to meet and negotiate with the union on that very matter.
Right. Did we say anything in there about meeting in negotiation and failing negotiating some kind of a settlement, we would obligate ourselves to mediation?
No, sir, we did not.
So as part of that settlement, we said we would let them know if we were headed this direction. We'd sit down and talk with them. Have we done that?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. So in other words, what we're doing is what we were authorized by virtue of a previous negotiated settlement to do.
That is our interpretation.
Okay. Mr. Thiel, did I incorrectly state any of that?
Yeah, there's some incorrect. Part of the county's impasse procedure allows for mediation. Now, the parties do have the option to agree or to disagree. But to disagree clearly without even making, I mean, I can understand terminating mediation at some point, but to not even try it, I think is a precedent, one that the Placer County has never taken before. And again, like I said earlier, it's a sad commentary on how you're handling labor relations. You're correct in stating that we did reach an agreement on an unfair labor practice that the union had filed against Placer County. There was a settlement that would allow the discussion of 5 work furloughs and allow the negotiation of 5 furloughs. And typically negotiation is a give and take. There's some actual discussion. There was no movement on the county side, virtually on anything. Our proposals, like a continuation of the no layoff guarantee initially, alternatives to avoiding work furloughs, because right now, I represent people that are stressed to the hilt. I have social workers that are, taking care of, shut-in seniors, child protection service workers that can't get their job done, and people's lives are on the line as a result of it. I'm talking to these people, they can't sleep, they're sneaking work at home, they're working through their lunch hours, and to add a furlough on top of it, where you need those people at work, and we have an option to, not only take care of the furlough issue, but also the layoff issue through a voluntary severance program that is being utilized by City of Sacramento's for one, County of Yolo just agreed to it earlier this month on implementing it, and both of them they've achieved success without damaging people. They encourage people to leave, people that are in a position to leave, as opposed to picking people from the bottom and just laying them off.
Mr. Thiel, if I may kind of refocus this, because what I'm hearing again is unions' insistence on combining these issues, these other tangential issues, with this action. My question to Mr. Boyle was simply, is the action that the board is being asked to take consistent with the negotiated settlement that we reached with you last year?
That would be correct. It is
Okay.
consistent with it.
Okay, thank you.
But again, it's one of those things that do we really have to do it? You know, given that the general
I understand
given the
that you
general fund
continue to
surplus of-
propose a number
Yes.
of other things you'd like us to consider, and that's fine. But as a result of a negotiated settlement with your union last year, we are authorized to take this action today, and that's what we're being asked to do. And you don't disagree with that?
No, certainly. You have the option to choose a way that would cause harm to working people and local businesses, as opposed to another option that would be friendlier and less harmful. Yes, you have that option.
And I appreciate your editorial comment on that.
Can
Thank
I
you.
ask a question again?
Yes,
Appreciate
Mr.
yours,
Rockwell.
too.
What you're asking to do, why don't you call it what it really is? You're asking for a golden parachute or a golden handshake. Those costs are going to have long-term impacts on retirement. There's going to be
Absolutely not.
long-term money paid out for that, and I don't see that as a viable option. I don't want to be like Sacramento County and be $166 million in the hole, or the city of Sacramento. They're both on verge of bankruptcy. We're trying to keep people working here and trying to keep this county so that we can do what we have to do and provide the services.
Well, you're incorrect in calling it a golden
Excuse me.
handshake.
And another thing I really take exception to, we're not trying to harm people. That's the last thing I want to do is put any more burden on people.
Okay, well, that's the effect.
Well, it's not the effect. If you look at it in a different way, you're trying to spin it your way.
I'd like us to keep the conversation to the item as agendized. We have before us a request by staff to, consistent with our negotiated agreement with the Public Employees Union, to identify and impose 5 furlough days. That's the item that's before us, and I'd like us to try to keep our conversation to that. Ms. Montgomery?
Yes, thank you. While I have no differing with this board on what last September's, I believe it was September's, negotiated settlement allowed us to do, one of my very wise friends has said, just because you can do something, it doesn't mean you should do it or that you are compelled to do it. Earlier today, we deferred a decision on a 1.6% fee increase because we felt that there was a need to understand better the nexus between the proposed fee increase, actual costs, and frankly, implications for development and construction in this county. And we, as a board, I believe, felt that further discussions were needed to support that proposed fee increase. So what I would ask this board to do would be the same thing on this item. I think until we have all really had the full opportunity to explore and understand what other options might be available to the 5 MTO days and what repercussions and ramifications might arise out of agreeing to these 5 MTO days, I would suggest that we do as we did on the earlier item and defer this.
Anybody else? Robert?
Yeah, I'll just reflect why I'm going to vote for this motion. Obviously, we're struggling budgetarily. Fortunately, we're in far better shape than virtually probably every other local government in the state of California, not to mention the state itself. But we're struggling, and we've seen concurrent decreases in our revenues over the last several years, and hopefully we're near the bottom. But the challenge is to retain the highest levels of service possible with the revenues that we have. And our options are restricted. We cannot do things like keep everybody working by freezing wages and retain exactly our same level of services because the process is too complicated by which to do that. Although in retrospect, I think that would have been a great solution 3 years ago. So I don't think we have the luxury of waiting to try to paste a lot of these budgetary pieces together, and I'm sensitive to the concern about keeping our employees working and trying to retain our levels of service and our primary obligation to our citizens, but I can assure you that the board has worked really hard to minimize the impact of layoffs and the effects of the worst economy since the Great Depression.
Tom, did you want to?
Yes, I just want to clarify two things, just for those who may not be aware of what's being talked about here. This is, again, I think, been clearly stated, 5 work furlough days. There's no layoff discussions as part of this. The county, actually, that's your Part B, did accept a proposal by Local 39 to continue the voluntary time off program. That is
Part C,
included.
I'm sorry.
Part C,
Part C
thank
in our
you.
agenda.
That is still included. The union did offer that. The other thing, when it comes to critical work activities being done, public safety, corrections, and indeed a large section of HHS and probation are good examples. There are exemptions specifically, had been requested by the departments and approved, so that MTO or work furlough does not apply to those critical functions, while we're still achieving the cost savings that put your budget on the beginning of a good path for this next fiscal year.
I would like to make my comments to the comparison that was drawn between this action and our previous action in regard to the building fees. In regard to the building fees, I can't tell you that I can sit here and recite for you the various components that make up the total capital improvements program for each of our various transit districts that then drive the 1.6% recommended increase. I can't tell you that I can reconcile in my head why we consistently see requests for increase year over year, and yet for the last several years we've seen decreases in project costs compared to engineers' estimates. All very fair questions that I believe need to have a full airing, and as we heard from representatives of the Building Industry Association, they understand that raising that issue and having that conversation may very well result in certain fees actually going up while other fees come down. I do feel comfortable in my understanding of what faces us in 2 months as we roll into the new fiscal year. We're staring at a $16 million budget gap, and the 5 MTO days are yet one small ingredient, approximately, what, $2.5 million in closing that gap. A very real cause, very real effect that is immediate and necessary. So that's why I'm very comfortable moving forward with this recommendation today. So with that, is there a motion?
I move approval of items 22B and C. Second.
We have motion Holmes, second Wygant to approve 22B and C. Roll call, please.
Holmes? Montgomery?
No.
Rockholm?
Yes.
Wygant?
Yes.
Euler?
Aye. Thank you very much. Why don't we, before we jump back to all the other department head items, why don't we take a quick break? We've been here 2.5 hours. Let's take 5 minutes, stretch our legs, and hopefully be back here within 5 minutes.
You're opening up public comment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We do need to wait until we have our clerk of the board here, as well as maybe one more. Maybe. First one's just an update, though. No, I'm more concerned about the clerk of the board being here to start the official record and getting all that. And call our April 27th, 2010 meeting of the Placer County Board of Supervisors back to order and pick up with Department Head item number 9, Facilities Services, a sewer service regulatory compliance and funding update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over the last 3 years, your board...
I'm sorry, for the record, your name. We all know your handsome face, but for those viewing at home.
Will Dickinson, Department of Facilities Services. This probably will be the most fun you've had all morning based on what I've seen so far.
I don't know. I've had fun.
Over the last 3 years, your board's provided significant resources to the Department of Facilities Services to meet new state and federal regulations pertaining to sewage collection and treatment. Today, I would like to report on our progress and discuss future funding needs. I've prepared a slideshow to guide us through this conversation, which I'm praying is going to appear. Ah, yes. Please note before I begin the slideshow that Exhibit A, which is found on page 137 of your package, includes financial and schedule information on the projects that we will discuss, which is not included on the slides. I just simply couldn't get that much information on these slides. Okay. This is slide shows Plant 1, which is located on Jurger Road in North Auburn. The existing plant was built in 1962, and it cannot meet current state and federal requirements. On your agenda today are 3 action items that will allow us to continue to make progress on the Plant 1 upgrade and expansion project. This is one of 2 possible solutions for meeting new state and federal water quality standards while also expanding capacity of our treatment plant. The second possible solution is known as the SMD1 regionalization project, which would close down Plant 1 and pipe raw sewage to Lincoln for treatment. This project remains under consideration. However, it appears to require a very large infusion of additional federal funding in order to become financially feasible. Moving on to our next project, these few slides show scenes from the reconstruction of the Auburn Ravine Lift Station, which is our largest lift station. This was a significant component of the Auburn Ravine Basin Siphon Relief Project. Here we have a very large crane unloading portions of a 30,000-gallon concrete tank. In all, we got 3 of those tanks in place, so now we have 90,000 gallons of storage. This will help prevent sewer spills such as the one that occurred on New Year's Eve in 2006. Through this project, we also improved access to the site and widened a bridge, which was very narrow and difficult for the guys to back over in the middle of the night when we were having problems. We also added modern pumps and control systems. And this was a major portion of the cost of the project, and it's going to be a major benefit to us in terms of being able to maintain a consistent flow which doesn't overwhelm our sewer system. We also completed the Richardson Drive sewer trunk line project, replacing 725 feet of 12-inch trunk line with 15-inch pipe on an improved alignment that took out a couple major bends. We also cleaned the Plant 1 digester for the first time in 15 years. And if you're not interested in seeing what's inside a digester, avert your eyes for a moment. This is a contract laborer who's pumping out solids from inside the digester.
Are those grapes?
Yeah.
Jim, it appears you're glad your mouth is unwired now at this.
For a multitude of reasons.
Those are grits and solids, as we refer to them. You'll be happy to know that project is complete. Plant 3, which serves the Horseshoe Bar Northern Granite Bay Area, was also built in the early 1960s and also cannot meet current regulatory standards. The denitrification project will help us meet permit requirements and reduce fines in the future. Ultimately, closure of Plant 3 is needed. Through the SMD 3 regionalization project, we propose to construct a pipeline to SMD 2, which is in Granite Bay, with the sewage flowing to the Dry Creek treatment plant in Roseville ultimately. The Sheridan Sprayfield project is also needed to eliminate discharges to surface water. This project is under construction, and we hope to have it done by the end of the summer. The Sheridan Water Supply Project is needed to meet new state standards for water capacity. We have completed the replacement of one pump, and we have a project under design for a new well storage tank and chlorination system. Closure of the Applegate Pond treatment system has also been mandated by the state. Again, we are proposing to regionalize this system by tying it into the SMD1 system. This project is in design and the environmental review stage. In December 2008, a contractor hit our 16-inch force main coming from the Dry Creek area, causing a large sewer spill. The isolation valve project that's shown on the screen above is designed to reduce the impact of any future incidents of that type. We still have one more valve to install this summer, so the project is 50% complete at this time. In addition to having several large capital improvement projects underway, we have significantly increased our ongoing maintenance efforts through the methods shown on the following slides. This shot is from the inside of a pipe from our TV inspection camera. It shows a opening in the pipe, a joint, which has allowed roots to grow in. The roots collect various solids and grease and can result in overflows, and this is one of the main things that we try to avoid as we run our sewer system. So far, in the last 3 years, we've inspected 33 miles of sewer pipe and made work orders for each defect that we've found. Smoke testing is something that we use to identify large leaks and illegal connections into the sewer lines. The smoke you see coming out of that gutter is because the drainage system from the house gutters have been tied into our sewer lines, which is not legal.
Yeah, that's Supervisor Holmes' house, isn't it? That SMD1 issue we could solve just by disconnecting his rain gutters.
With a lot of these problems, our goal, obviously, is to keep water out of our sewer system during major rain events. That's one of the main contributors to overflows. When we find these defects, one of the ways we can fix them is by lining the pipes with these liners that get shoved down through the holes. Again, these have all been done by contract services. They're inflated, heated up, and they create a new pipe lining inside the pipe, which is very durable and is all done with very little impact to anyone from street closures and so on. I'm sorry, it's 13,544 feet of pipe were lined in the last 3 years. We also coat manholes to seal off leaks to reduce infiltration of groundwater. And of course, our own crews do the cleaning, majority of the cleaning that we do, and this is very important to keep the lines free of grease, rocks, roots, and other obstructions, and it's also very important for preventing the sewer spills. We have cleaned 323 miles of pipe in the last 3 years, and these pipes are all on a rotating schedule. And we have a very good outcome, we believe, from our maintenance efforts. This chart shows sewer overflows by year, going back to 1992 and to the present year. So far, we've had none in 2010. Pretty dramatic drop in overflows, which is one of our main goals in our system. In addition to trying to keep water out, we also have to keep our pumps and at our lift stations and our control systems in good shape and up to date. This is the Tierra Heights lift station, which we're having problems with. It was starting to fall down a slope there on that bank. Came in and stabilized it, improved the aesthetics, and put in new pipes, new pumps and control systems for it. This is the difference between an electrical panel and a new electronic control panel. Excuse me. Funding for most of the projects discussed has been secured through some combination of sewer maintenance and operation fees, connection fees paid by new customers, grant funds, and in some cases, county general funds. However, funding shortfalls exist for the 4 projects shown on this slide: the SMD3 Regional Project, Applegate Regional, Sheridan Water, and Sheridan Sprayfield. The SMD3 regional shortfall is the largest, but it is also the furthest out into the future, hopefully allowing us more time to come up with a good long-term solution. That 12/13 date for that project is probably a little bit optimistic. It probably, at least part of that funding will be needed further down the road, even from 12/13. In addition, we have operating budgets that continue to show operating shortfalls, and they will continue to do so until we get the capital projects done that are associated with those districts. It's a real key issue that I want to point out is we have to get those capital projects done, or we're never going to get the operating budgets back in good shape. And the operating budgets are the Sheridan, Applegate, and SMD3, the same ones, coincidentally, as with the capital projects. Just to get through fiscal year 9-10, we do need about $220,000 split between Sheridan and Applegate, and the needs extend out through 12/13. Hopefully, by the time we will at least have part of the problem resolved at SMD3. It's a fair question to ask, why do we need to finish these projects? What would be the outcome? The consequences, unfortunately, are fairly severe. The state has the authority to fine us. We are also subject to third-party lawsuits if we don't get these projects done. Of course, we will not get our financial problems resolved if we don't complete them. We have very old facilities that are continuing to deteriorate as we don't get them done. And we have grant funds that have currently been secured for many of these projects that we would like to make sure we don't lose. We have come up with a possible solution that we'd like to hear your board's reaction to today, if possible. The solution is to take out short-term loans from the Solid Waste Management Enterprise Fund, which is a fund that has about $17 million in reserves right now, with definitely a long-term need to hang on to the reserves, but nothing immediate on the horizon that would require us to use those funds. So it is legal for the county to loan through interdepartment type situations like this, provided there's a payback and with the same interest that would have been earned if the money was left in the treasurer's fund that they manage. The loans would need to be guaranteed. Our idea is through the general fund, and repayment needs to be guaranteed also. We're hoping that there's future general fund revenue sources as the economy improves and things change in the future that could repay those loans. Thank you very much. Bill Zimmerman and I are here to answer any questions that you may have, and we'd be happy to hear your comments on this.
Well, just to make sure I got everything. From the presentation, it looked like there were a total of about $18 million in shortfalls.
There's more than that.
Let me move my stuff here.
Maybe if you can go back to that slide.
There are anticipated shortfalls that I think it's closer to maybe 19 million, 18, 19 million, somewhere in there.
I'm in the ballpark. And so is that all of the known shortfalls, for this purpose for sewer issues under current regulation?
Yes.
And obviously regulation could change and changes the ballgame for us.
Correct, and obviously, some of these projects have not even gone through the pre-design stage, considering SMD3 regional, so some of the costs could change in the future.
Yeah, thanks.
Could we go back to that slide, please?
That was a good slide.
The previous one? This one?
That's the one.
Okay.
So you're saying that we're fully funded for SMD1?
No, we're not currently fully funded for SMD1, and that's a very important distinction. I'm glad you mentioned that. We have a number of projects that we anticipate being able to find funding for. Those projects are not mentioned up here, even though they currently are not dialed in completely with the funding. SMD1, for the SMD1 upgrade project, for example, we have an item further on down the agenda where we're hoping to get state revolving fund loans for that project. Another alternative would be bond funding. But there will be, of course, a serious impact on the customers' fees. We're at $82 a month right now in SMD1. We'll very likely have to raise that if we move forward with that project.
Because what I'm seeing there is from those three projects, we're looking at approximately $30 million worth of infrastructure costs associated with full development of those three projects. Is that the total cost of those three projects, bringing them to that level of compliance? For instance, SMD3, we're still anticipating the regional solution connecting into SMD2. That's the cost of that, the $18 million.
That's our current best estimate.
Right. Okay, so everything that you outlined adds up to about $30 million right there. But we've heard the regional solution project for SMD1 estimate as high as $70 million, if I recall correctly.
Actually, the upgrade project is more in the $70 to $85 million range. The regional project, our current estimate, which is not a very good estimate, granted, is in the $141
okay.
range.
So anyway, we're cracking $100 million all in total dollars spent before we believe we reach compliance throughout our area.
Yes.
Okay. And when I see shortfall up there, that tells me that, for instance, on the Applegate Regional, that tells me we've got, $2.7 million already identified, set aside for that project, and we're missing 4.6.
That's correct.
Okay. So again, back to SMD1, how much do we have set aside for that project?
We have about $7 million in reserves right now.
Out of the $70 million that we need?
Correct.
So we're 10% of the way there.
If we're lucky, 10%.
So when we start talking about, and the reason I'm asking these questions is when we get back to your last item, or the last slide, where you start talking about identifying possibly other funding sources, if you will. Really, the nut we're trying to crack here through some kind of funding source beyond dollars we already hold is closer to $100 million.
Yes. When you throw in SMD1, yes, it is.
So when we start talking about repayment from future general fund revenue source, as yet unnamed, Middle Fork, you might be looking at $100 million in total obligation to solve our wastewater problem and bring us compliant.
Yes, I would just point out that SMD1 and SMD2 are the two districts that have our best financial situation. SMD1 has a much better ability to repay any loans
Right.
and so on.
Right. Understand. Okay. The only question I had, Ms. Montgomery?
Thank you. Will, could you go back to the operating budget slide?
Certainly.
I want to make sure I'm understanding what we're really looking at here. For Sheridan, for example, fiscal year 11-12 is shown as no operating budget shortfall. Is that because it is our expectation that we will have brought it up to its necessary compliant level and costs will then pay for itself, or are we just not going that far out?
A couple different things have come into play with Sheridan. For one thing, your board approved a 3-year cost increase to those customers last year. We also, it is also partly what you say, we are going to have some compliance issues that we're going to have resolved through those capital projects. In addition, resolving those compliance issues will also provide us more capacity, and we hope to have new connections. In fact, I've received a lot of interest from people out there. Those new connection fees will also help fund some of the project.
Okay, so I guess my concern then on that is that, again, speaking about Sheridan, just because it's at the top of the list, if we don't come up with the funding shortfalls for the capital improvements, we can expect to see farther out in years operating budget shortfalls as well.
Unless we really, really significantly raise the fees, which the community's already suffered quite a bit from that. So,
thank you.
Tom, do you have a...
Yes, if I could just put it in context. Your board 4 months ago, 5 months ago, had pretty extensive workshop on sewer rates and sewer issues, and this is a follow-up to that. So I think at that time you spent quite a bit of time talking about how the rates on all these are going to be fairly high as a given. This is a result of that discussion showing what happens to fund the improvements. I do want to applaud Facility Services. They worked extensively with our office trying to look at these, call it the small package of funding increases need, not SMD1, not regional sewer. This is the subject for discussion, I believe, later on today. So with the package that they came up with, looking at if we could do some internal fund borrowing, recognizing it's probably even over 3 years, that we'd be able to come up with a capital cost to have these capital improvements provided, which then drives down the operating costs and equally important, make sure we're in compliance with our discharge permits, because otherwise automatic fines come in to trigger, which is also another expense. So it's a very complicated set of how much can the public sustain in paying operating fees and still be able to stay in their houses, the contribution to finish the capital projects, where's that funding source going to come from? And at least for these, we've identified one fund that seems to have the wherewithal to provide a loan. And then looking forward to moving this package, as tough as this is solvable, and then simply from that SMD1. And this includes, I think, when you get to SMD1, there's capacity for fees to help support potential bond issuance itself, where these really don't have the ability to support bond repayments at the same time. So this is separate because there's no payback on self-supporting bonds, which could be the case in SMD1 to a degree.
yes, exactly correct. In SMD1, we fully anticipate being able to repay any loans or bonds. With these districts, if we had to repay them, we would still be continuing to suffer operating losses. One thing that you mentioned that I forgot to mention earlier is part of the reason that we are suffering these continuing operating losses is we are currently being fined in some of these districts. SMD3 in particular, we're expecting fines of about $110,000 perhaps for the upcoming year based on our new permit requirements.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? This was simply informational items, no action is necessary. I don't see any questions, so we'll go ahead and move on to 9B. Speaking of SMD1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Bill Zimmerman. I'm the Environmental Engineering Manager with Facility Services. This morning, we're asking your board to approve an agreement with Owens Somas for the final design of the SMD1 treatment plant upgrade project. The agreement is for an amount not to exceed $7,884,500, and it includes both design and construction management services. Will spoke briefly about Plant 1 and some of the challenges that we face at that facility. One thing that I would like to add to that is that our permit has included compliance schedules for some of the discharge standards that we're not currently able to meet, and that's provided us protection from penalties and fines from the state. Those compliance schedules expired in March of this year, and so we're now at a point where we're accruing those fines, and we expect that to be about $111,000 a year. In March of 2009, your board approved an agreement for the preliminary design of this project, and we have now completed that work. We've included an executive summary from the pre-design report as part of our agenda package, and it kind of runs you through some of the improvements. The basic design concept is an initial project that will provide 2.7 million gallons a day of capacity, and that should be adequate capacity for the next 25 to 30 years. At that point, the plant will be expandable to 4.0 million gallons per day. Our staff report was written based on a draft of the pre-design report, and we've now finalized that document and updated some of our cost estimates. And there are a couple of numbers in our staff report that I'd like to update. The first is in the background section of our memo, and there's an estimated project cost of $87 million. That number should be updated to $79 million. And then in the executive summary that's attached, there is a construction cost estimate of $76 million, and that should be updated to $68 million. And that's just through the process of us refining the design, better understanding the actual size of the improvements and how they're going to fit in and around the existing facility. In March of 2009, your board also directed us to proceed with a request for proposals for the final project design. We went through a fairly extensive process. We sent out request letters to 129 different firms. We received 4 proposals, had a panel evaluate those proposals, interview the firms, and that panel recommended Owen Somas as the best qualified firm to perform the final design work. And so on the basis of that, we've negotiated the agreement that we have before you this morning. At this point, I'd like to turn the microphone over to our director, Jim Durfee, to give you our recommendation.
Thank you, Bill. A couple of things in terms of a little bit of late-breaking news. We continue to look for opportunities to find more cost-effective ways to upgrade the treatment plant or to resolve these problems. We've been working with a company called PERC, P-E-R-C, over the last couple of months. They came to us unsolicited about 2 months ago, and they posed some fairly compelling, interesting concepts in terms of delivery of the project. They talk about a design, build, finance, operate method. What we're doing, what we're recommending here is actually the more traditional design, bid, build process. There were very well thought out reasons for not going down the design build approach to begin with. I know your board knows that Facility Services is really an advocate of design build where it fits. It was not our opinion that it fit well in terms of a sewer treatment plant. However, PERC does, as I said, provide some fairly compelling approaches. I am continuing to investigate that with them. We are working with them to get them to provide a much more comprehensive cost estimate at their cost, and I will keep your board apprised of that as we move along. But I wanted to let you know that I was working on another parallel track in terms of coming up with an option. It doesn't change the department's recommendation at this point in time. What it may mean is that we would come back to you at some point 60 to 90 days out with an update, update from them, and perhaps further recommendations at that point. I can't predict that at this point in time, but I did want to let you know that that was out there. We've also had some conversations just this morning with Supervisor Wygant, and I wanted to kind of turn the microphone to him. I know, or through the chairman, of course. I know that Supervisor Wygant wanted to discuss this in a little bit more detail.
I really like the way you usurp the chair, Jim, anytime you feel.
With my apologies to the chair.
You saw my affirmative nod.
He didn't throw anything at me, so I thought it was all right.
Obviously, as you all know, we've worked a long time on this regional notion, and so I have some questions, but I have a request of the board, which I'll get to that just up front so we all know. I'd like to continue items B, C, and D until our next board meeting to vet out more thoroughly, prospectively, some fatal flaws in the regional project. The reason for that, and Will, I want you guys to pay attention to my numbers because I don't need a lot of time, but I want to make sure I'm thinking correctly, and I know some of these numbers are estimates, but there's just some perspective that struck me. We had a regional wastewater meeting last Thursday, and apologize for the lateness in my delivery, but since that time, without a lot of time to do a lot of research on this issue, I had some thoughts that I think are worth reviewing and particularly more thoroughly with Supervisor Holmes. But I think the difference in cost to our ratepayers in the short run of the regional solution versus upgrading our existing facilities is about $40 million. And that's based on the notion that if you assume that our upgrade is about $80 million, and Will just mentioned that the regional solution is $140 million, 141 I think you said. What we also know, but again, feel comfortable, correct me if my thinking's wrong, is that the $141 million is far less certain and more likely to be conservative, if anything. So it could be less than that, more likely to be less than that than more than that. The 80 million or 70 something to $80 million is a much more certain number, but we're still talking about this difference of about $60-ish million in pure short-run cost. But on the other hand, the expected demand for the upgrade is for it to be expanded to 4 MGD, correct?
Correct.
And that cost us $160 million, if I remember correctly, from the JPA meeting last week.
I don't have that number off the top of my head.
We don't have a number for the full build-out of the treatment plant.
I thought you had mentioned that at the JPA meeting, but if that's correct, the difference between those costs long-term is actually erased. And then if you assume that we're going to continue to receive the core monies that we have been receiving, the cost difference is likely, uncertain, but likely to be about $40 million difference. So I want you all to ponder all that if the board is willing to continue this for the next 3 weeks and kind of sharpen your pencils and revisit those numbers, because if there's a fatal flaw in my thinking, I actually want to know it and take that into consideration. But before we approve this, if we actually increase that $40 million gap by about 20%, it just puts the regional solution much more on the side of becoming unlikely, and in my view. And I think we do have some opportunities to fund it. And if you go back 50 years and look forward, I'm just stuck on this notion that if I'm also correct that the regional solution is by far a better sewage treatment solution, except for this particularly short-term cost. I don't want us to be in a situation where people 50 years from now look back and think, why in the world would we continue to upgrade these small plants when in fact we could have gone to this new facility in Lincoln for the sake of a pipeline, noting that there are particularly short-term costs that we know for sure. So I'm just requesting 3 weeks, because I think I can get some good enough answers for what I'm thinking between now and then. I don't think it's going to hurt us. I understand and appreciate the pressure we're under with the regulatory issues. There's also something new that surfaced there that I think can be helpful to us. So it's one of those grand solution ideas that if it has a fatal flaw in it in the short run, I think we'll know in 3 weeks. And if the board's receptive to that, I'd appreciate it. And I then want to work closely with staff, the Supervisor Holmes and some others to find out some answers to these specific questions.
I would support that request. I think this is a very, looking long range, it's probably the best solution to go regional, but dollars are dollars, and if there's too many dollars involved, then you'll have to look elsewhere. So I would support that request.
I'd be okay with that. Ms. Montgomery, you have a thought?
Yeah, I would just have a couple questions. Will, is 3 weeks long enough for you to go out and do that sort of analysis and bring it back to us?
I think most of the numbers are at hand, so I think we could do it in that time frame. Yes.
Okay, and then a question that I actually have for you, Robert, is, what is your expectation that our federal representation locally will support coming up with funding for regional? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
What are
but-
my expectations that our local congressional representative, my expectations are that our local congressional representative will not support our regional solution. But we've been having some success with our 2 senators, and so I'm counting on that.
Right, and I realize we've had the success with our senators, but, I mean, obviously, at some point, Congress is probably going to want to have some sort of say in funding.
It's actually a risk issue, but it appears to be a minimal risk issue. We're currently having success without the support of our particular congressman, and I've actually had that conversation with Rich Holland tonight, but I want to, that's one of the conversations I want to have, is develop that more fully. And it appears to be a circumstance whereby we can expect to get $20 million or maybe more, but at the rate of about $1 to $2 million a year. So that's the short-term financing issue, but there are prospective solutions to that also, so I just want to think through all that more. And one of the things I want feedback on, I'm going forward on the strong presumption, knowing that, for example, the Lincoln facility, as I understand it just recently, was told that it's the only facility of its scale and scope in the state of California that has yet to receive a violation. So I'm assuming well-run. But there could be some dynamics just in the functionality of a pipeline that offset that. So if, in fact, I'm wrong about my assumption that if you could wave a magic wand and forget about cost, piping the discharge down to Lincoln is not without some other risk, I want you to think about those risks that might be inherent in the management of a piping system of this particular scale and scope. But with that, I'd appreciate the 3 weeks.
Okay, well, seeing no opposition, at least hearing no opposition voiced by any board members, then we'll just go ahead and continue those 3 items, 9A, B, and C, to our Tahoe meeting.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
I'm sorry, what did I say, 9A, B, wasn't it A, B, and C? I'm sorry, B, C, and D. Thank you. B, we already heard A. Sorry, Will, we don't need to hear you again. We'll take B, C, and D, thank you, and continue those to the meeting up at Tahoe.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, our goal is absolutely to answer whatever questions your board has, to provide you with the information. We're faced, particularly at SMD1, but throughout the districts, we're faced with very difficult, complex decisions. We understand that, and our goal is to do that. And we appreciate that you understand both the regulatory and capacity pressures that we have in order to come up with a decision. And I can assure you that our only goal is to get you folks the information you need to make the best long-term decision you can for those communities. So with that in mind, we'll be happy to be back at the next meeting in 3 weeks with that information for you.
Just on those 3, because you guys are still on the hook for a couple more items, so why don't we go ahead and jump down to item 9E.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In February of 2008, your board approved an agreement with Jones & Stokes to prepare an environmental impact report / environmental impact statement for the Applegate Regional Sewer Pipeline Project. I've discussed that project in my slideshow, so I won't go through that again. Due to midstream changes in the project design that were out of their control, Jones & Stokes will incur additional unanticipated costs to complete environmental review. The additional cost for completing this work in its amount not to exceed $83,890, bringing the amended contract limit to $252,223. Sufficient funding exists in the Applegate Regional Sewer Project budget to pay the additional costs and get us through the design process. Therefore, staff recommends that you authorize the chairman to execute the First Amendment to Agreement 12547 with Jones & Stokes Associates in an amount not to exceed $83,890 to provide for additional environmental services on the Applegate Regional Sewer Project. Thank you.
Supervisor Wygant?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Let's first see if there are any questions by board members. And seeing none, any members of the public wish to address the board on this item? Seeing none.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion Wygant, second Rockholm, to approve item 9E regarding the Applegate Regional Sewer Project Agreement number 12547. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Thank you very much. Moving on to the Sheridan Water Supply Project Agreement for Design and Engineering Services. Will, you again?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On January 27, 2009, your board established a capital project known as the Sheridan Water Supply and Distribution Project. 13 proposals were received for engineering work needed to pursue this project. The RFP review panel recommended Brown & Caldwell as the best qualified firm to perform the work. Accordingly, staff has negotiated an agreement with Brown & Caldwell to provide design and permitting, engineering services during bidding, construction and post-construction, and limited construction inspection. Therefore, staff recommends that your board approve an agreement with Brown & Caldwell, Inc. for engineering services relating to the design and construction of improvements to the Sheridan Public Water System in an amount not to exceed $220,973, and authorize the Director of Facility Services to execute the agreement on behalf of your board, contingent upon review and approval by County Council and Risk Management. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions in regard to the Sheridan Water Supply Project Agreement Design for Engineering Services? Seeing no questions, any members of the public? And do we have a motion? Motion Wygant, second Holmes, to approve item 9F. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you very much. Moving on to G. We're going to hear from Mary. Thank you, Will.
Thank you very much.
Chairman, members of the board, Mary Dietrich, Facility Services. I'm happy to be here with the last transaction documents that are associated with the relocation of the Rockland Library. I would like to make a correction that was contained in the memo and the resolution. We incorrectly identified the building address on Granite Drive. It should have been 4890 Granite Drive. We've provided an updated resolution and information to the clerk of the board in that regard. The actions requested by your board are to approve a lease agreement with the Rockland Redevelopment Agency for lease of the 16,000 square foot building located at 4690 Granite Drive, and to authorize your chairman to execute that lease agreement. Second action is to approve a transfer agreement between the county and the city for the existing Rockland Library facility that is located on 5th Street in Rockland, and to authorize the chairman to sign that agreement. And then lastly, approve a resolution delegating authority to the Director of Facility Services to execute all the documentation that's associated with the transactions in the that are discussed here today. Really briefly, this is just the real estate side of the transactions that have been talked about in terms of relocating the library. On April 6th, you all approved a construction contract for the tenant improvements associated with this. The lease agreement is a 10-year agreement with the redevelopment agency for $1 per year. We negotiated 15 5-year options to extend for another $1 a year. So we have the property tied up at our option for 85 years for $85. So an excellent bargain these days. We did negotiate as well an agreement on Rockland's part that they would contribute a minimum of $3.5 million towards a new library should we ever relocate from this facility and build a new property. County is responsible for maintenance of the building and utilities, and the RDA is responsible for maintenance of the parking lot and grounds. The transfer agreement is a quitclaim of the county's interest in this property. It's due primarily to the property, and the project was originally developed as a joint powers authority, mixed ownership underneath, and there was also a reversionary clause that the property and building were to revert to the city of Rockland if it was ever used for purposes not library and museums. So we had a legal issue associated with the property that led us to the recommendation that we transfer our interest and quitclaim it to the city of Rockland. With regard to the approvals on 4/13, the city council approved the transfer agreement, and this evening they will be taking action to consider and approve, I'm sure, the lease agreement associated with all of this. So with that, we do recommend that you take the actions listed in the board memo. And just really briefly, it's been a complicated set of transactions. Appreciate County Council, Property Management, and Rockland staff for all the hard work in pulling this together.
G. Comments by members of the public? I'm sorry, Jennifer.
Mary, thank you. I do have one question, which is, your report states an existing pond is located adjacent to the library. Who does have responsibility for that, and who has legal responsibility, say someone should fall into the pond?
With regard to that, the premises specifically do not include the quarry pond that is on that property. The maintenance of that pond, fencing, et cetera, is the responsibility of the redevelopment agency, who is the owner of the building and the property. From a legal perspective, our hope would be that the city would be the agency that is looked to first. I couldn't guarantee that someone, if there was some accident, wouldn't look to the county as being an adjacent occupant, but the deal is structured that that is not our property, not our premises in the lease.
Thank you.
Supervisor Holmes.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure that the pond is secure. I mean, there is fencing around it, and it's not a chain link fence. It's a pretty sturdy fence.
Yes, there is a fence that surrounds the
Right,
entire.
so it'd be difficult for anybody to access. Okay, thanks.
I was thinking we could solve our forest to a pool issue and
You might need a
dedicated bus
ladder.
line and down.
Might wait when this comes back in 2095 to make that adjustment.
All right, any members of the public? No, seeing none, do we have a, I'm sorry, that sounded like a motion from Supervisor Rockholm on item 9G 1 through 3, all inclusive, is that correct?
Second.
Is that what that was, Rocky?
Yes.
Yes, it was, that's what I thought, and seconded by Wygant. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you very much. Yes.
Yes, lots of hours.
All right, on to Health and Human Services. Animal Services,
Thank you.
one of this board's favorite topics.
Yeah, mine too. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Mark Starr, as you know, Director of Community Health Clinics and Animal Services, and I did not bring any animal slides, which, having seen all the wastewater treatment fund, I should have done so, but apologize for that. Item 10 is this year's Animal Trust Fund grant awards. Your board's being requested to take two actions. The first one is to authorize the Director of HHS to sign various Animal Trust Fund grant agreements which total $60,000. The suggested recipients are the Auburn Spay and Neuter Clinic. Actually, that one is a collaboration with 3 other nonprofits as well. The Wiley Animal Rescue Foundation, Field Haven Feline Rescue, Placer SPCA, and a New Hope Animal Foundation. And the amounts and details are that we've recommended are in your board materials. The second action is simply a budget revision that would allow us to be able to disperse these funds to the recipients. These grant awards are 100% funded through the Placer County Trust Fund for Animals. You probably know this program has been available for many years. This is actually the second year, though, of the existing grant award process. We made some revisions, and last year we awarded also $60,000 to several nonprofits in the community, and this seems to be a sustainable amount at the present time. This year we received 9 applications, and the Grant Review Committee is recommending funding for 5 of those 9 projects, totaling, again, $60,000. The 5 that were selected were chosen because of their relevance and ability to benefit the needs of pet owners as well as animals in the county. Through the Placer County Trust Fund for Animals grants, these 5 local nonprofits will provide valuable community-based services, and especially spay and neuter services. I think 4 of the 5 funded projects have spay-neuter components, but also we're recommending funding other activities for our shelters and various adoption services. Basically, all of these will reduce costs and impacts to our community that could result from unwanted dogs and cats. Gifts to this trust fund help to provide for the needs of animals, and those needs are things that aren't funded by the county or other agencies or foundations. Donations to the trust fund are solicited in many ways, and donors may designate how their particular contribution is used, such as for spay-neuter programs, for our shelters, for education, publicity. There's an Edna Robinson Estate Small Animal Fund, and a kind of a generic category called Greatest Need, which gives us discretion. Just want to close by saying that our gratitude goes out to all the donors across the county, but in particular our employees. Employees really make up the majority of the annual donations via the Placer County Combined Giving Campaign, and their generosity makes it possible for these great projects to be conducted by our excellent community partners. Thanks, and obviously any questions at this hour you might have, I'm happy to answer.
Questions by any board members? All right, seeing none, any members of the public? And do we have a motion? Motion by Wygant, second by Holmes to approve items 10, A and B inclusive. All in, roll call, please. I'm sorry.
Wygant? Yes. Holmes? Montgomery?
Yes.
Rockholm?
Yes.
Euler?
Yes. Thank you very much. Mr. Tabor, want to talk to us about asphalt overlay, please?
Will do. Kevin Tabor, Department of Public Works Road Maintenance Division Manager. This next item, we're asking you to adopt a resolution authorizing the chairman to execute and award the contract to Tyker Construction, who was the low bidder for our spring overlay, which is federally funded. We received 7 total bids, with a low bid from Tykert of approximately $1.6 million to a high bid of $2,077,000 from an out-of-town contractor. This project is 100% funded with ERA funding, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds, so there are no matching funds, county funds required to get this project built. So with that, I'll entertain any questions you may have.
I see not, Jennifer.
Kevin, I just wanted to make sure, because this has come up as an issue with many of my constituents. We understand that there is a relationship between Tykert and the former or maybe current Chevrolet plant. Where is this material coming from?
It's my understanding that a majority of it will come from their Sacramento plant, their Perkins plant, potentially Marysville, Hallwood, but most likely Sacramento.
You say a majority. Does that not preclude some being produced in Meta Vista?
I don't think any will come from Meta Vista. I don't think the plant's operating, and with the large quantities that we have, Meta Vista wouldn't be able to serve it anyways. So Tykert hasn't submitted a formal plant notification to me, but they did indicate verbally that it will not be Meta Vista.
Thank you.
I should note on the resolution awarding the contract to Tykert Construction, we're also asking you to authorize the Director of Public Works to execute contract change orders up to 20% of the contract amount.
After you're arrested.
Good afternoon. My name is Tyrone Gorey. I live in Meta Vista, and I was just here to make sure that we followed up on the comment that I didn't want to see this asphalt come from Meta Vista because it is extremely controversial, and we are watching it on the radar. We don't want to see the increase of public roads being used for asphalt production. It's still a very controversial issue, even though it was voted on 2 years ago. So if the traffic increases in Meta Vista, there will be a definitely public outcry to be very concerned that Placer County is not voting in and then also collaborating with the production of asphalt at Chevrolet. Chevrolet asphalt could be obtained someplace else. So that was just a comment. I really appreciate Jennifer commenting and watching out for her constituents. Thank you.
Just, if I might, for transparency, though, just to point out that our contract with Tykert does not specify a plant location, does it?
That's correct.
Okay,
that's
so
correct.
we believe it's coming from Sacramento, but there's no guarantee it's coming from any particular plant, is that right?
Right, yeah, because they have not made their course, since that contract hasn't officially been awarded to them, they have not made their material submittals, including plant locations, but the verbal indication was not.
But I just want to make it very clear, because rarely do we specify point of delivery for our purposes, not a point of origin.
Yes, for an overlay contract, definitely.
All right.
Correct.
Jennifer?
And Kevin, I'd like to be involved in, if possible, in any future discussions that we might have with this, obviously in concert with Tykert, just to make sure the concerns are addressed, if at all humanly possible.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Well, but let's be clear, we submitted, I'm guessing, an RFP for these various projects outlined on page 161, 5 of them, and we asked folks to respond and give us quotes, and we have no understanding of what they assumed their point of origin was when they gave us a quote, but I have to imagine that when we look at Mount Vernon Road and possibly Placer Hills Road, if they had quoted material coming out of that plant in Placer County, are we, I'm certainly not comfortable telling them that their bid is invalid based on that, or that we would want them to re-quote or subject this to a new quote. I mean, this board took action in regard to production at that facility. So long as operations of that facility are consistent with this board's action, then materials derived from that plant can and should be used in Placer County. And if we want to agendize, if the representative of the 5th District wants to re-agendize the use permit that was authorized by this board for that plant for these purposes, then we need to discuss that. But we can't, I don't think this board can sit here and arbitrarily make determinations in regard to business practices for somebody like Tykert and what material suppliers they use. I just don't know how we go about doing that.
I think you're misunderstanding my proposal,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. My proposal is that we sit down and have these discussions to try to identify where the materials will be coming from. I'm certainly not proposing a rebid. I'm not proposing any sort of limitation that we legally cannot impose. I'm proposing open, transparent discussions among all the parties to try to see if we can come up with something that keeps everybody happy.
Okay. Okay. To the extent, because this action is requesting that we authorize Director of Public Works to execute the contract and associated change orders, so I'm sure that the Director of Public Works will be more than happy to have that conversation, to ask them what their bid assumed by way of the origin and make that information available.
That's all I'm asking.
Okay.
Move approval.
Okay, motion by Montgomery, second by Holmes. We've heard from the public. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, none. Thank you very much. On to Auburn Folsom Road Widening Project, contract 73-168.
Greetings, Chairman, members of the board. Peter Kratz with Public Works for item 11B, the Auburn Folsom Road Widening Project. As you know, this project will widen Auburn Folsom Road from 2 to 4 lanes in the Granite Bay area between Fuller Drive and the county line. The project is divided into 3 phases, south, middle, and north. The south phase was completed last year. The middle phase is under construction, and the north phase is to be bid subsequent to completing the proposed design services under this board memo. The design amendment is needed as a result of having to resequence phasing of the project caused by some funding and right-of-way acquisition challenges. With this amendment, we should be able to complete the design of the north phase. Environmentally and fiscally, those sections are summarized in your board memo before you. So with that, we ask your board to adopt a resolution authorizing the chairman of the board to sign and execute contract number 73168, amendment number 4, with Dokken Engineering for the Auburn Folsom Road Widening Project in the amount of $261,000, and authorize the Director of Public Works to execute future amendments up to $40,000 if necessary for additional engineering services not covered by this original scope of work of the PSA. With that, happy to answer any questions you might have.
I don't see any here. Any members of the public? All right. Motion by Brock Holmes, seconded by Holmes. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Aye, opposed, none. Thank you very much. Tahoe City Transit Center contract 1085.
Yes, sir. Peter Kratz again for the record with Public Works, here for item 11C, award of construction contract for the Tahoe City Transit Center. The location of this facility to be built is on the U.S. Forest Service 64-acre parcel in the southwest portion of Tahoe City and adjacent to State Route 89. The facility is to occupy about 2.5 acres, and it consists of an intermodal transit center to enhance DPW's TART public bus system, provide associated parking facilities for the public, and additional features articulated in the board memo. The construction bids for this project were opened on February 22nd, 2010. 9 bids were received and 1 was found non-responsive. There were a number of bid protests, and one bidder actually filed an appeal with the Director of Administrative Services determination of an untimely protest. A bid protest hearing committee was held on April 13th, 2010, upholding the Director of Administrative Services ruling that it was an untimely protest. In the end, the lowest responsible and responsive bidder was determined to be Aspen Developers Corporation of Truckee with a bid of just over $4.2 million. Environmentally, this project has gone through an extensive environmental process to satisfy TRPA, NEPA, and CEQA requirements, and through that process, your board certified a final CEQA environmental impact report on January 24th, 2006. Fiscally, the total project cost is estimated at $7.4 million, with total construction costs estimated at $4.7 million, which includes construction management costs that are in addition to the bid of $4.2 million. The project is fully funded by a variety of federal and state and local sources. And so with that, the department asks you to adopt a resolution awarding with county council and risk management review and approval contract number 1085 to the responsive low bidder Aspen Developers Corporation, in the amount of $4,229,473.10 for construction of the Tahoe City Transit Center, authorizing the chairman to execute the construction contract on behalf of the county and authorize the Director of Public Works to approve and sign contract change orders up to $422,947 if determined necessary. Happy to answer any questions you might have on this item.
Questions by board members? Questions by members of the public? Do we have a motion?
Move approval. Second.
Motion by Rockholm, second by Montgomery to approve the item. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None.
Thank you.
Item number 12.
Chairman, members of the board, really know how to clear out a room, don't I? Barbara Bassano with the Sheriff's Department. You are requested today to approve a grant from CalEMA, which is the Emergency Management Administration, for a marijuana suppression grant. The funding for this grant is $275,000 for this upcoming year, plus additional equipment, which is requested to have early purchase. The sheriff is asked to execute the grant. The funding for the grant runs from March through for 3 years, but we are asking that it be implemented from July of this upcoming year through the end of the fiscal year. We will update the final budget appropriately. In addition, these are large grows. These are not the, people necessarily on the street. The focus of this grant is the large grows in our area so that we can diminish the population that goes to our high schools and to other areas. We, with this grant, one of the things that we were notified as well is that this grant could be up to a 3-year grant for an additional $275 for the 2 subsequent years thereafter. And that's depending on if funding continues the way it is currently. So with that, I ask for your approval of this grant, the approval of the recruiting process for the deputy sheriff, which will be one of our unfunded positions. We're not adding any allocations to our budget, and for the equipment as well. Thank you.
Any questions by board members on the item? We'll pass on public comment on this item, unless the other representative of the Sheriff's Department has something he'd like to add. No, good. All right. Do we have a motion? Montgomery, second by Holmes. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. We will adjourn into closed session, and then I'm sorry? Oh, okay. And then you want to go ahead and let folks know what it is we're going to be discussing in closed session?
The board will now adjourn to closed session to discuss the 2 litigation items set out in number 13, A and B on the agenda, and the 1 item of anticipated litigation. And in addition, the board will discuss labor issues with its labor negotiators.
And then we will return in order to report out the results as required by law.
Yes, we will.
All right, thank you.
And because it's